Chapter 779. The next morning, we took a bus to the National Forest Park of Qingxiu Country. Then, we continued in the direction of Qingxiu Country. It had been a few months since I left Qingxiu Country. That time, I was looking for the 7-star mugwort and sent Yao Yao back to Qingxiu Country. Yao Yao had almost become a sacrificial offering. Fortunately, Yao Yao had become a monster king, so she wouldn't be used as a sacrificial offering to the Fox King. She had also become the real saintess of Qingxiu Country. I wonder how she was doing in Qingxiu Country. I had to meet her this time. If necessary, I would need her to help me. After all, the Fox King statue was broken. It was hard to say if my identity as the God's messenger was still useful. As soon as we reached the peak of Green Dragon Mountain, an old man appeared in front of us and blocked our way. However, he seemed to recognize me. He hurried to greet me. "God's messenger, why are you here?" Hearing that, I understood. The old man was also a monster fox of Qingxiu Country. However, I had never seen him before. He was sent to patrol the periphery, so he didn't have a high position in the clan. I told him that I was here to discuss something with their clan leader. He nodded and said that he would go and report to the clan leader. I was in a hurry this time. I didn't know how long it would take for him to come and go. Thinking about it, I waved my hand and gestured for him to lead the way. He didn't hesitate. After nodding, he led us forward. We followed him for a long time. It was the same mountain road that we had walked the last time. It wasn't as difficult to walk as before. He led us into a valley. At the end of the valley, a familiar scene appeared in front of us. The flowers and trees here were beautifully cut, and the surrounding houses were well proportioned. It was Qingxiu Country. We continued to walk forward until we reached another valley. It was where the Fox King Palace was located. The old man took us to the stairs of the Fox King Palace and excused himself. I continued to walk forward with the sacrificial evil spirit. Following the stairs, I walked into the Fox King Palace. The young ladies on both sides of the stairs seemed to recognize me as they bowed in unison in a respectful manner, just like before. When I was about to reach the gate of the palace, a man wearing a black robe walked out. I recognized his attire at first glance. He was none other than the high priest of the Green Hill clan that I had met last time. Seeing me approach, the black-robed high priest hurriedly came forward and bowed in greeting. I didn't know that God's envoy was coming. "Please forgive me for not going out to greet you." I waved my hand and told him that it was fine. I then asked if the chief was in the hall, as I had important matters to discuss with her. The high priest nodded in response before stepping aside to let me in. As soon as he entered the palace, he saw the patriarch sitting on the throne with his eyes closed. Perhaps she sensed my arrival. She slowly opened her eyes, stood up, and said to me, "May I know why the God's envoy has come here?" Her words and actions didn't seem to welcome me, which made me a little unhappy. Although I didn't expect her to be as respectful to me as the high priest, I didn't expect her to be so cold to me. In any case, I'm the divine emissary of the Green Hill clan. Don't you have the basic respect? Could it be that she was still brooding over what happened last time? I didn't reply but stood on the spot and stared at her. At that moment, the atmosphere in the hall was rather awkward. The high priest seemed to have sensed the strange atmosphere and hurriedly tried to smooth things over. She invited me to take a seat and instructed the servants to serve tea. I smirked coldly as I stood on the spot without any movement. Seeing that, the high priest remained silent for a moment before walking to the front of the Fox clan's leader and whispering something into her ear. The Qingxiu clan's leader, who was initially unwilling to budge, frowned after hearing the high priest's words. However, she didn't continue to argue with me and shifted her gaze. After the high priest returned to my side, the Qingxiu clan's leader finally lowered her stance and bowed to me. Seeing that she had backed down, I didn't have any reason to be arrogant anymore. After nodding slightly, I sat down with the evil sacrificial spirit. Due to the previous incident, there was no movement in the hall for a while after I sat down. After I took a sip of tea, the Qingxiu clan's leader asked, "May I know why the God's envoy has come?" I had originally wanted to resolve the matter regarding the monster pellet as soon as possible. However, judging from the previous situation, the Qingxiu clan's leader might not agree to it. Thus, I changed my statement and said that I had come to visit Yao Yao on behalf of her parents. When the Qingqiu clan's leader heard me mention Yao Yao, her expression changed slightly. She seemed to have something to say, but she held it back. I frowned. Why did she have such an expression? Could it be that something had happened in the Qingqiu clan in the past few months? I asked, but I swallowed the words that were on the tip of my tongue. Judging from her attitude, she might not tell me the truth. I should wait until I see Yao Yao and ask her personally. With that thought, I urged the Qingqiu clan's leader to inform Yao Yao. The Qingqiu clan's leader didn't beat around the bush and immediately ordered someone to invite Yao Yao over. After a while, I sensed Yao Yao's aura before she appeared. I was delighted at first, but immediately frowned. It wasn't that something had happened to Yao Yao, but that her current aura was a little too strong. If it wasn't for the fact that I had interacted with Yao Yao for a period of time and were very familiar with each other, I wouldn't have dared to confirm that such a strong aura was being emitted from her. I couldn't even determine her current cultivation realm. Could it be that her power had already surpassed mine? While the others weren't paying attention, I asked the sacrificial evil spirit in a low voice. He told me that Yao Yao had already reached the middle stage of the Yang God realm. After hearing this news, even though I was prepared, I couldn't help but be shocked. When I had first met Yao Yao, she only had Shi Yao's cultivation realm. After spending some time in the fatty's monster refining gourd, she had only reached the peak of Shi Yao when she came out. After arriving in Qingqiu country, she had smoothly advanced to the heavenly master rank. This speed was unimaginably fast. I didn't expect that in just a few months, she had advanced from the Seal Heavenly Master rank to the middle stage of the Yang God Heavenly Master rank. This cultivation speed was really unbelievable. However, after thinking about it, she was originally from the most noble Tushan clan in the Qingqiu clan. The cultivation talent of the Monster clan was directly related to their bloodline. Moreover, when Yao Yao had advanced to the Heavenly Master rank, she had obtained the Fox King's true blood. She had also experienced the training in the monster refining gourd, so her cultivation speed was much faster than others. It was reasonable that she had her current cultivation. While I was thinking, Yao Yao had already jogged into the main hall with a smile. She looked at me in surprise. When the Qingqiu high priest saw Yao Yao enter, he quickly got up and bowed to her, greeting her as a saintess. However, the clan leader, who was sitting on the high seat, didn't move at all. He looked at her coldly, and a trace of sharpness flashed in his eyes. Seeing her expression, I was almost certain that something had happened in Qingqiu country during the time I had been away. Yao Yao and the clan leader had participated in it. Yao Yao waved at the high priest, indicating that there was no need for formalities. She ignored the Fox Monster clan leader. Instead, she walked to my side and pulled my arm. She whispered, "Big Brother Zhou, you're finally here. Yao Yao misses you very much." Hearing this, a smile appeared on my face, and I reached out to touch her head. It seemed that after Yao Yao's bloodline had awakened, she was much more cheerful than before. For a moment, the main hall became a place for me and Yao Yao to exchange pleasantries. The clan leader couldn't stand it anymore, so he coughed a few times on his seat. This movement interrupted Yao Yao's words, but she didn't get angry. Instead, she pulled my hand and walked out of the main hall, saying that she wanted to bring me around Qingqiu country. Before leaving, I intentionally took a glance at the clan leader of Qingqiu country. At that moment, she didn't hide the gloominess on her face. We left the Fox King Palace and walked toward the small path. Along the way, Yao Yao introduced the scenery of Qingqiu country to me, and also talked about what she had seen and heard during this period of time. As she talked, she even asked about the fatty situation and complained about why he didn't come with me. Speaking of the fatty, I sighed and told her the purpose of my visit. After hearing that, Yao Yao's expression changed. After staying silent for a moment, she said to me with sadness, "Why is it like this? The monster pill. I heard the high priest mention it before. It said that it's the treasure of the monster race. I'm afraid that they won't give it away easily." This was naturally within my expectations. The monster race's cultivation speed was slow. Unless they had a good bloodline and had a fortuitous encounter, it would be difficult to advance to the Yang God Celestial Master Realm. Even if they could advance, their lifespan wouldn't be long. Hence, the existence of the monster pill was extremely rare. It was reasonable that it was treated as a treasure. However, I had to obtain the monster pill this time. It was related to the fatty's safety, so I didn't have a choice. I asked Yao Yao how to get the monster pill. She shook her head. I don't know, but Big Brother Zhou, don't worry too much. I'll ask the high priest. He might have a way. I nodded. At that moment, I could only ask the high priest for information. As for the clan leader of Qingqiu country, it was obvious that she wouldn't provide any help. Speaking of the clan leader of Qingqiu country, I couldn't help but recall her expression earlier. Hence, I asked Yao Yao what was going on. Yao Yao sighed when she heard me mention the problem. Then, she explained the reason to me. Not long after I left, Yao Yao's power started to increase by leaps and bounds. When the Qingqiu country's people heard the news, they treated her as the person who revitalized the monster race, as the true saintess of the Qingqiu country. However, as her cultivation slowly approached the Yang God Celestial Master Realm, there was a voice in Qingqiu country. Some people started to discuss and suggested that after Yao Yao advanced to the Yang God Celestial Master Realm, they would recommend her as the new clan leader of Qingqiu country. After all, she was the only one who obtained the Fox King's blood. She would definitely lead Qingqiu country back to its peak. At first, these words were only discussed among a small portion of the Qingqiu country's people. However, after Yao Yao advanced to the Yang God Celestial Master Realm, the voices became louder and louder. In the end, it reached the Fox clan leader's ears. Chapter 780. Tushan was a sacred spirit of the Green Hill clan, but ever since her ancestor had married the late human emperor, Yu the Great, they'd been publicly acknowledged as traitors of the monster spirits. For thousands of years, the Green Hill clan had sacrificed their flesh and blood to the monster spirit emperor. It wasn't until Yao Yao became a sky monster that she'd escaped that fate. When I was still in the Green Hill Kingdom, everyone in the Green Hill tribe believed that I was the divine messenger, especially the high priest. He was sure that Yao Yao had obtained the Fox King's true blood and was definitely the heir chosen by the Fox King. However, Chief Qingqiu obviously didn't think so. She even doubted my identity as the Oracle. Therefore, as the clan leader and the high priest questioned each other, the Green Hill clan soon split into two factions. One faction supported the high priest, believing that only Yao Yao could be the leader of the Green Hill tribe, and even the Fox King in the future. The other side believed that Tushan's bloodline represented traitors. The higher Yao Yao's position was, the greater the danger she would bring to the Green Hill clan and even the entire spirit creature race. Therefore, according to the tradition, it was best to sacrifice Yao Yao to the spirit creature emperor. Only with the awakening of the demon the Arch would the demon race have true hope. On one side was the clan leader of the Green Hill clan for many years, and on the other side was the high priest with extraordinary status. Both of them had the support of many clansmen, and the situation was in a stalemate. The entire Green Hill clan was in a precarious situation, and even Yao Yao's position in the Green Hill clan had become subtle. After listening to Yao Yao's words, I finally understood Clan Chief Qingqiu's actions earlier. Looks like our trip this time has unintentionally been swept into a dispute. Although Yao Yao's strength is high, but after all she is still inexperienced, she doesn't know how treacherous people's hearts are. She was afraid that she would not be able to defeat the Fox Demon Clan leader. The current situation was in a deadlock, and there was still room to turn the situation around. If Patriarch Qingqiu used some tricks in secret to obtain the support of his clansmen, then it would probably be difficult for him to go against all of them, and his life might even be in danger. I thought for a while, then asked, Yao Yao, what do you think? She shook her head and said that she didn't know either. She only hoped that the chief and the priest could end their dispute and reach a consensus. It could be seen that she did not know what was at stake, and that the high priest was most likely the one in charge. Although the time I spent with Yao Yao is not long, but I understand her character very well. She was kind-hearted and simple, so she was easily deceived. When faced with such a situation, all she wanted was to end the dispute as soon as possible. However, what she didn't know was that when it came to a battle of ideas, it was usually a battle to the death. There was almost no room for reconciliation. Under such circumstances, the only way was to strike first. Seeing that she was so kind, I didn't say anything else. I patted her head and gestured for her to bring me to the high priest. I wanted to understand the situation and mention the matter of the monster pill. Yao Yao nodded and brought us back. When we were about to reach the Fox King Palace, we walked in another direction. Along the way, some of the Green Hill clansmen greeted us when they saw us. They were even more respectful towards Yao Yao. There were also some who saw us from afar and hurriedly avoided us. Combining what Yao Yao said before, I naturally knew what was going on. About 10 minutes later, we arrived at the high priest's residence. This was a very ordinary-looking courtyard with only 3 thatched cottages. However, the thatched cottages were hung with colorful cloth strips. We had passed by many courtyards on our way, but it was the first time we had seen such decorations. From Yao Yao, I knew that such decorations were unique to the high priest's residence. It was said that the cloth strips were very important to the Green Hill clan. After hearing what she said, I took a few glances at the cloth strips. However, I didn't see anything special about them. On the contrary, the evil sacrificial spirit stood at the side. He stared at the cloth strips with an excited expression. When I asked him the reason, he paused and replied, "There's a wild aura on this item." I nodded. He was a man from the wild, so he was definitely very sensitive to this aura. Perhaps it was because he had seen these items that he recalled the past. Although it had been thousands of years, his heart still palpitated when he saw the items from that time. At that moment, the high priest seemed to notice my arrival. He quickly opened the door and walked out. He bowed at us and said, "Saintus, God's envoy, please come in." I led Yao Yao into the house and looked around. There was a portrait in the main hall of the house. The portrait looked like a half-human, half-beast. It was exactly the same as the Fox King statue that I had seen previously. I had some doubts when I saw the portrait. The Fox King should be worshipped by the monster race. How could he allow others to worship him privately? The high priest seemed to see my doubts and quickly explained, "God's envoy, please don't blame him. This is the tradition of the Green Hill clan. The sacrificial line must hang the Fox King's portrait on the god's throne and worship him daily to ask for the Fox King's protection." I nodded and didn't ask any more questions. I sat down at the side. The high priest seemed to live alone. He boiled water and made tea himself. I recalled that when I had come to Green Hill Country previously, it was his son who had brought us to the Fox King Palace. That person had left a good impression on me. Thus, I casually asked why I hadn't seen him today. After hearing my question, the high priest sighed. "That unfilial son. Let's not talk about him." It was just a casual question, but I didn't expect to get such an unexpected answer. Could it be that there was some animosity between the father and son? I wanted to ask further, but after thinking about it, it was their family matter. With my identity, it wasn't appropriate for me to ask about it. Thus, I didn't mention it again. After exchanging pleasantries, I went straight to the point and asked the high priest. When I was in the Fox King Palace, I saw that the Green Hill clan leader was unhappy. He seemed to be disgusted with me. I don't know the reason, but I hope that the high priest can tell me. I didn't tell him that I'd found out the reason from Yao Yao. I wanted to see what the high priest had to say. After all, Yao Yao was still young and inexperienced. Although the high priest was on her side, I couldn't rule out the possibility that the high priest was using her identity to achieve other goals. If that was the case, I would be falling into their trap if I got involved. It would be disadvantageous to Yao Yao in the end. After hearing my question, the high priest quickly nodded and said in a deep voice, "This is considered a scandal of Green Hill Country. If I were to say it, it would be a joke. However, since the divine messenger mentioned it today, I don't dare to hide it." Thus, he explained the situation again, and it was the same as what Yao Yao had said. I nodded and temporarily ruled out the possibility that he had ulterior motives. However, from his words, I heard a piece of information that I hadn't heard from Yao Yao before. According to the ancestral system, the position of the Green Hill clan leader was changed every 100 years. However, there was another rule in the ancestral system, which was that the Green Hill clan leader had to have at least a young god cultivation base. Since ancient times, the monster clan had suddenly disappeared. For thousands of years, the bloodline of the Green Hill clan had been difficult to continue. The spiritual energy of heaven and earth was not as abundant as it had been in ancient times. Thus, the cultivation speed of the Green Hill clan became slower and slower. In the recent hundreds of years, there was almost no new young god celestial master. Thus, in recent generations, no one had mentioned the ancestral system of changing the position every 100 years. As time passed, everyone had even forgotten about it. Even the great priest in black had thought that the monster clan was on the decline and that the Green Hill clan would only become weaker. It wasn't until Yao Yao's appearance that he saw hope. Although Yao Yao was from the Tushan clan, her bloodline was excellent, and she had obtained the Fox King's true blood. Her cultivation speed wasn't inferior to some of the ancient geniuses. She had even been recognized by me, the divine messenger. Thus, he firmly believed that Yao Yao was the one who could revive the Green Hill clan. On the other hand, the great priest knew what the Fox clan leader was thinking. If the Green Hill clan leader had done it for his own benefit, the great priest of the Green Hill clan could have deposed him. However, under the current circumstances, he had no choice but to suppress his clansmen's suspicions. He could only spread the ancestral rules in private to incite discussion among the clansmen. However, he had underestimated his clansmen's worries. Moreover, the Green Hill clan leader had used a thunderous method to suppress the matter. There was nothing he could do at the moment. Left with no choice, the great priest could only use his prestige in the clan to stand up for Yao Yao. That was how he managed to win the support of half of the clansmen. However, in the end, the two sides were in a stalemate. It was difficult to determine the winner within a short period of time. After saying that, he looked at me and suddenly knelt down. I know that the divine messenger is on good terms with the saintess. If I can get your support, no one in the Green Hill clan will oppose it. Divine messenger, please help Green Hill return to its glory. After hearing that, I didn't immediately agree to it. Instead, I frowned and pondered. In terms of closeness, I naturally had to help Yao Yao. However, the great priest of the Green Hill clan kept talking about the glory and hope of the Green Hill clan. It was true that Yao Yao was from the Green Hill clan, but if she really wanted to be the Green Hill clan leader, it wouldn't be as simple as just a status. She would have to bear many responsibilities and bear a lot of pressure. Thus, I had to ask for Yao Yao's opinion on this matter. I turned to ask Yao Yao for her opinion on this matter. In the end, she shook her head and expressed that she didn't want to be the clan leader. She just wanted to be with her clansmen, like her mother had said. From what she said, it was obvious that she acknowledged her identity as a member of the Green Hill clan. Moreover, she was willing to listen to her mother's arrangements. Apart from that, I didn't have many other thoughts. To be honest, although I had the identity of the Monster Emperor, it was too far away. As compared to the rise of the Monster Clan, I was more concerned about Yao Yao's opinion. Thus, I conveyed Yao Yao's opinion to the great priest and asked him not to make things difficult for Yao Yao. Unexpectedly, after hearing that, the great priest knelt on the ground and kowtowed fiercely. As he kowtowed, he cried, "Absolutely not. Only the saintess can lead our Green Hill clan to rise again. The Fox King is still waiting for us. We definitely can't continue to fall." Seeing him in such a state, I frowned. Disregarding everything else, in terms of age, he was considered an elder. I felt awkward receiving such a huge bow from him. Just as I was about to help him up, Yao Yao, who was at the side, beat me to it. She squatted beside the great priest and wanted to help him up. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she cried, "Grandfather priest, don't be like this. Quickly get up." The great priest wasn't moved and said, "If the saintess doesn't agree to this matter, I will kowtow to my death in front of you." Yao Yao was kind-hearted. Moreover, the great priest had taken good care of her. She had long treated the great priest as her family. She had never seen him like this before. She quickly nodded and agreed. After hearing that, the great priest finally stopped moving. He knelt on the ground and looked at Yao Yao, praising her. I stood at the side and couldn't help but sigh in my heart. Once Yao Yao decided to fight for the position of the patriarch, the country of Green Hill would be in turmoil. This was just a small matter. The most important thing was that Yao Yao herself would carry a heavy burden and her life wouldn't be as peaceful as before. Chapter 781. After he said that, Yao Yao looked at me, but her eyes seemed to be avoiding my gaze. Perhaps she had already realized that this matter wasn't a trivial matter and that it might bring trouble to me. She looked at me and said softly, "Big brother Zhou, this matter." Before she could finish, I waved my hand and interrupted her. I didn't hurry to reply to her, but turned to look at the sacrificial evil spirit to ask for his opinion. The sacrificial evil spirit had been silent after listening to the high priest's narration of the situation. However, when the high priest mentioned that the Fox King was waiting for them there, he showed a gratified expression. Hearing my question, he didn't reply and only nodded slightly. The Qingxiu clan was the only remaining monster race. With the identity of the sacrificial evil spirit, he was more qualified than me to handle this matter. Moreover, in terms of power, I needed the sacrificial evil spirit support to resolve this matter. Hence, I had to seek his opinion before making a decision. With his agreement, I didn't hesitate and said to the Qingxiu priest, "Since Yao Yao has agreed to this matter, I have nothing else to say. However, I have a request. After the matter is settled, I want to take a monster pearl." Now that I mentioned the monster pearl, it was more or less threatening. However, it couldn't be helped as the fatty's matter couldn't be delayed. After I said that, I looked at Yao Yao apologetically, hoping that she could understand. The high priest obviously knew what a monster pearl was. Hearing my request, his gaze obviously froze, but he didn't rush to reply. After pondering for a while, he gritted his teeth and nodded. This matter concerns the monster race's grand plan. The monster pearl is nothing. As long as God's envoy can help the Saintess successfully lead the Qingxiu clan, I won't complain even if you take my monster pearl. Hearing that, I felt at ease and nodded, signaling for him to stand up and speak. Since I had agreed to this matter, I needed to understand the current situation in the Qingxiu clan. It would be best if we could resolve this without bloodshed. With the sacrificial evil spirit around, although I wasn't worried about any unforeseen events, the Qingxiu clan was still a monster race. Unless it was absolutely necessary, I wasn't willing to use a method that would cause both sides to suffer. I believed that the sacrificial evil spirit and Yao Yao were the same. I told him what I was thinking. After hearing what I said, the high priest nodded in agreement. Then, he explained the situation to me in detail. The Qingxiu clan leader had been in power for several hundred years, and her position in the Qingxiu clan was not inferior to the high priestess at all. Moreover, she had also developed her own forces over the years, and there were more than 10 clansmen who had reached the Celestial Master Realm. He's only at the Seal Heavenly Master Realm. He doesn't even think much of me, much less an evil spirit. However, what puzzled me was that as far as I knew, the Qingxiu clan's bloodline was limited, and it was extremely difficult for them to cultivate to the Heavenly Master Realm. In a vast Green Mountains country, there were at most 20 to 30 people above the Celestial Master Realm, including Yao Yao, the Patriarch, and the High Priest. Since there were more than 10 Seal Heavenly Masters in the clan leader's faction, it meant that she controlled the majority of the clan's power. Moreover, she had been in charge of the Green Hill clan for hundreds of years. Even the High Priest had said that her prestige was no less than his. Among the ordinary clansmen, there should be a majority who supported the clan leader. I couldn't help but feel puzzled. Under such circumstances, why didn't the Qingxiu clan leader take action? Why didn't she use forceful methods to suppress the matter earlier? Instead, it resulted in the current stalemate between the two sides. Hearing my doubt, the High Priest explained, "Of course, she has the ability to do so, but as the patriarch of the clan, she has to consider the impact of her actions. Now, we're only arguing in secret, and we haven't laid our cards on the table. Once she takes action first, she'll be in the wrong. Moreover, as the High Priest, I have the absolute right to speak on the matter of sacrificing the Fox King. As long as I don't agree, she doesn't have the right to capture the Saintess and use her as a sacrifice." I nodded as I understood what he meant. Given the current situation, it seemed that we couldn't publicize the matter directly. Thus, I asked the high priest what we should do. After pondering for a while, he said, "Originally, none of us could convince the other party, but you represent the Fox King's will. Now that you're here, perhaps the patriarch will change her mind. Why don't we take this opportunity to make things clear and seek her opinion? We'll wait for her reply before making a decision. What do you think?" Naturally, I had no objections and nodded in agreement. Then, I followed the high priest out to the Fox King Palace to look for clan leader Qin Xiu. Along the way, the high priest's footsteps were much lighter than before. It was likely that he felt much more at ease seeing that there was hope to resolve the matter. His attitude was optimistic, but I didn't think so. The high priest wholeheartedly served the Fox King and regarded my identity as the god's envoy with great importance. However, clan leader Qin Xiu might not be the same. Furthermore, clan leader Qin Xiu's attitude towards me in the Fox King Palace wasn't respectful at all. It was unrealistic to expect her to suddenly change her mind. As we spoke, we arrived outside the Fox King Palace. At that moment, a servant girl stopped us and said that the clan leader was discussing important matters with the elders inside and had specially instructed that no one was to enter. If we wanted to enter, we had to let her inform us first. Hearing that, I couldn't help but sneer coldly. With our identities, we could enter and exit the Fox King Palace freely. Clan leader Qin Xiu must have specially instructed us to do such a thing. At that moment, the high priest wasn't as optimistic as before. His expression was filled with anger. Just as he was about to flare up, I extended my hand to stop him. Since we were here to discuss matters, then we should hold a discussion attitude. Furthermore, no matter what clan leader Qin Xiu's final decision was, I was confident that I could resolve the matter, so there was no need to rush. We waited on the spot for a full 5 minutes before the palace door slowly opened. 5 to 6 elders in plain robes walked out. All of them had the cultivation of a celestial master, so they must be the elders that the servant girl had mentioned. Seeing the 3 of us, the elders' expressions were slightly awkward. They cupped their hands towards us and didn't say a word before they left in succession. At that moment, the servant girl from before walked forward and bowed towards us. "The clan leader invites you in." I walked into the main hall first. At that moment, clan leader Qin Xiu was sitting on the main seat with a cup of tea in her hand. Seeing us enter, she slowly placed the teacup down and said expressionlessly, "Everyone, please take a seat." After saying that, she didn't bother with us and continued to drink her tea with her head lowered. She didn't seem to have any intention of making small talk. Although I had expected this, I didn't think that her current attitude would be even worse than before. I couldn't help but feel angry. However, now wasn't the time to shed all pretense of cordiality. Just as I was about to take the initiative to speak, clan leader Qin Xiu finally stopped drinking her tea and asked indifferently why we were here. At the same time, there was a hint of mockery in her eyes. She seemed to be completely fearless. I didn't know if she had found some way to deal with us during the discussion with the elders. Seeing her expression, I didn't have much hope in the first place. At that moment, I felt that there was no meaning in discussing matters anymore. The high priestess also seemed to sense that something was wrong. After a moment of silence, she stood up with a solemn expression and replied, "We've come this time to discuss with the clan leader about the candidate for the next clan leader." The moment she opened her mouth, she directly made the matter clear. Hearing that, clan leader Qin Xiu didn't get angry. Instead, the mockery on her face intensified. She slowly replied, "High priestess, why do you say that? The position of the clan leader hasn't changed in 100 years. Of course, I will continue to lead the Qin Xiu clan. Does the high priestess have someone else in mind?" After saying that, her gaze finally carried a bit of cold light. The high priestess wasn't afraid at all. She raised her head and stared at her. The Qin Xiu clan has a rule that the position of clan leader will change every 100 years. Now is the time for the change. Clan leader Qin Xiu snorted. "You're the high priestess of our clan. Don't you know that only people with the cultivation of Yang God Celestial Master can take the position of clan leader? In the entire Qin Xiu clan, Only you and I have the cultivation of young God, celestial master. Your position as the high priestess has always been passed down through the bloodline. You can't take the position of clan leader. So, apart from me, who else can take the position of clan leader? Hearing her words, the high priestess immediately retorted, Yao Yao is the holy maiden of Qing Qiu country. She already has the cultivation of young God, celestial master. Moreover, she has the Fox King's true blood in her body. She's recognized by the Fox King. She was sent by the Fox King to save the Qing Qiu clan. She's qualified to take the position of clan leader. The high priestess pushed Yao Yao forward and even emphasized the Fox King's true blood. Clan leader Qing Qiu snorted again. How dare you? How dare you mention the Fox King? As the high priestess of our clan, instead of worshiping the Fox King, you protect the sacrifices in every possible way. Don't you know that ever since the Tushan clan betrayed our clan, they're just sacrifices to the Qing Qiu country? They're not even our clansmen anymore, right? Or do you want to learn from the Tushan clan and betray the Qing Qiu clan? She didn't expect the Qing Qiu clan leader to be so sharp-tongued that he labeled the high priestess as a traitor. He even defined the Tushan clan as sacrifices and didn't recognize them as members of the Qing Qiu clan at all. The high priestess trembled slightly. She was clearly infuriated by her words. After a while, she gritted her teeth and said, Don't slander me. Our ancestors have long since decreed that the descendants of the Tushan clan will automatically be recognized by the Qing Qiu clan when they surpass the heavenly master level. When Yao Yao became a heavenly master, you witnessed it with your own eyes. She's not only a member of the Qing Qiu clan now, but also the true holy maiden of Qing Qiu country. The Fox clan leader sneered and said in a mocking tone, Oh, which generation's ancestor made this rule? Where's the record? How come I've never heard of it? When I heard that, I immediately understood. No wonder the Qing Qiu clan leader was so confident. It turned out that he was prepared to talk about the clan rule. The high priestess was stunned. After a while, she said angrily, The Qing Qiu clan's rules have always been passed down orally. How dare you deny the clan rule? It was obvious that the Qing Qiu clan leader insisted that there was no such rule in the clan, but the high priestess could do nothing about it. In fact, there was no need to argue about it. When Yao Yao became a heavenly master, the Qing Qiu clan leader didn't object to it when the Qing Qiu clan members mentioned the clan rule. Naturally, he said that on purpose. However, the problem was that the Qing Qiu clan leader's rule was passed down orally. If the Qing Qiu clan leader denied it, it was hard to prove whether it was right or wrong. As expected, the Qing Qiu clan leader continued to sneer. The Qing Qiu clan's rules are indeed passed down orally, but it's not only passed down orally among the priests. Why have the other clansmen, including me, never heard of this rule? The high priestess was speechless. It was obvious that she realized the clan leader's trick, and her face paled. After a moment of silence, she finally spoke again. This time, she didn't argue about the clan rule. Instead, she emphasized the Fox King's blood in Yao Yao's body and said that she was chosen by the Fox King to lead the Qing Qiu clan back to its peak. The clan leader could tell that the high priestess was at a loss for words. She became even more confident and shouted, How dare you? How do you know that she is the one chosen by the Fox King? The Fox King bestowed her with the blood. Why couldn't it be for her to increase her cultivation speed so that she could absorb more power? Who can prove that it is true? At this moment, I couldn't help but admire the clan leader's eloquence. In just a short while, she had turned the situation around. She even made the high priestess speechless. Chapter 782. When the tribe leader saw me stand up, she raised her eyebrows and said faintly, Oh, how's the god envoy prove it? Looking at her words, it seemed that she had already expected today's events and wasn't surprised that I had stood up. I reckoned that my identity as the god envoy wouldn't be of much use. With the current situation, there might only be a chance if I lured the Fox King out. Thinking about that, I smiled at the tribe leader and said, I'm the envoy sent by the Fox King, so I have full authority to represent the Fox King. Yao Yao is the holy maiden of Qing Qiu Kingdom and not the sacrifice that you mentioned. Not only that, I also represent the Fox King in supporting Yao Yao to become the next tribe leader. After I said that, the high priestess, who was originally lowering her head, suddenly straightened her body and her eyes were filled with pride. The tribe leader's face was about to freeze as she glared at me fiercely, as though she wanted to skin me alive. She clenched her fists so tightly that the veins on her hands were bulging. At that moment, the evil sacrificial spirit that hadn't made a move by my side lifted her head and looked at her. The tribe leader might have sensed that the evil sacrificial spirit's power wasn't ordinary and that she wasn't her opponent. Moreover, I had the identity of the god envoy. If she were to make a move on me, it would mean that she was rebelling against the Fox King. By then, the Qing Qiu tribe wouldn't be able to tolerate her. She hesitated for a long while before slowly loosening her fists. She avoided talking about the Fox King and started to make a fuss about me. There's no way to verify what the god envoy said. Furthermore, you have a close relationship with Yao Yao, so you'll definitely side with her at such a crucial moment. So, can I assume that you're just making up your story? I didn't expect that she would still be quibbling. I didn't give her any face and said coldly, "How dare you? Could it be that you dare to go against the Fox King's orders?" After hearing what I said, the tribe leader's expression darkened and she pouted. "I don't dare." After she said that, she immediately pulled herself together and seemed to have thought of something before she continued. "However, since the god envoy said that it was the Fox King's orders, could the god envoy please take out the Fox King's order and announce this directly? Otherwise, what you said previously can only be considered as your side of the story. Our Qing Qiu tribe has an important mission, and the current situation is even more severe, so we definitely can't trust others so easily." After listening to him, I couldn't help but feel startled. I had never heard the sacrificial evil spirit or the high priest mention anything about the Fox King warrant. Could it be that she's deliberately trying to make me panic? I immediately walked toward the sacrificial evil spirit and whispered, "Is it true?" After getting his confirmation, I looked a little embarrassed. She then asked him if he had the warrant, but he just shook his head and didn't say anything. On second thought, perhaps the evil sacrificial spirit had the token on his own body, but his body had been destroyed. At this time, he was only attached to the little zombie, so it was normal that he didn't have the token. Looking at the high priest's expectant gaze, it was not difficult to tell that he did not have the warrant on him. I had thought that I could save the situation by bringing out the Fox King, but I hadn't expected that I would end up smashing my own feet with a rock. Moreover, she claimed that this was for the demon race's mission, which pushed her to an extremely high position. It seemed like it would be very difficult to overthrow her. At the moment, I couldn't think of a reasonable rebuttal, so I stood rooted to the spot for a long time. The tribe leader saw that she had the upper hand and that I was speechless, so she hastily chased after me and continued, "Since the god's envoy can't take out the Fox King warrant, then the previous words don't count." After she said that, she looked at me with a smile and continued, "Ever since Yao Yao appeared in our Qing Qiu kingdom, I realized that the Qing Qiu tribe had reached a moment of life and death. I didn't expect that she had advanced to the Yang God Celestial Master rank. Our Qing Qiu kingdom definitely can't tolerate her. So, before you all came, I had already discussed with the elders to resolve the matter. However, in consideration of the god's envoy's reputation, I changed my decision at the last minute. I won't harm Yao Yao's life, but I will use a secret technique to abolish her cultivation and expel her from Qing Qiu Kingdom. She will never be able to step into Qing Qiu Kingdom again." At that moment, she was displaying the authority of the tribe leader and didn't allow for any rebuttal. It was obvious from her words that she didn't want to completely fall out with me. Of course, I knew that it wasn't because of my identity as the god's envoy, but because she was afraid of the sacrificial evil spirit around me. However, I didn't know what the secret technique she was talking about was. If something went wrong during the process, I was afraid that it would be difficult to guarantee Yao Yao's safety. Thinking about that, I slowly approached the high priestess and asked about the secret technique that the tribe leader had mentioned. The high priestess seemed to know that there was no hope of turning the situation around today, so she sighed and explained to me. According to him, the secret technique was passed down by the tribe leader of each generation. It was a method used to punish the tribe members. However, the process was very dangerous, and the person being punished was in extreme pain. It was worse than having their tendons pulled out and bones pulled out. If one's willpower wasn't strong enough, it was very likely that they would lose their life. After listening to him, I finally understood what the tribe leader was planning. She kept saying that she would spare Yao Yao's life for my sake. However, it seemed that as long as she used some tricks during the process of Yao Yao receiving the ring, Yao Yao would definitely die. At that time, even if I wanted to cause trouble for her, she could push the blame onto Yao Yao herself and blame her for her lack of willpower. Previously, I didn't have any hope for peace talks. After seeing the tribe leader's insistence, my heart wavered in recommending Yao Yao. After all, this matter didn't directly benefit me. Moreover, Yao Yao didn't have the intention to become the tribe leader. I really couldn't bear to force this burden on her. However, after analyzing the tribe leader's intentions, I understood that she didn't intend to let Yao Yao go. She wanted to kill her. I definitely couldn't let that happen. It wasn't a solution to be in a stalemate here. Looking at the tribe leader's complacent expression, I felt vexed. After thinking about it again and again, I brought Yao Yao and the sacrificial evil spirit to leave the Fox King Palace. The high priestess wanted to stop me, but the words were stuck in her mouth for a long time. In the end, she sighed and followed after me. After exiting the Fox King Palace, the high priestess kept sighing behind me and muttered something. After muttering to himself for a while, he trotted over and knelt down in front of me. With an anxious expression, he said, "Lord God's envoy, you must save the saintess. You can't let the patriarch cripple her cultivation." How could I not understand the meaning behind it? But besides taking Yao Yao away from the Green Hill country, there was no other way. However, Yao Yao refused to leave. It seemed that if I wanted to turn the situation around, I would have to find another way. Fortunately, the tribe leader didn't use force. Perhaps she wanted to wait for me to understand the situation and retreat. After helping the high priestess up, I told her my thoughts and asked her if she had any weakness as the tribe leader. At present, we couldn't make the first move. Firstly, we had no reason to attack her. Secondly, once we made a move, it would definitely cause internal turmoil in the Green Hill country. At that time, a bloody battle would be unavoidable. Yao Yao and the sacrificial evil spirit didn't want to see such a situation. After listening to my words, the high priestess hesitated. It seemed that she was thinking about something. This kind of matter couldn't be rushed, so I brought everyone to the high priestess residence. After entering the house, the high priestess bit her lips and sighed softly. It seemed that she had made a decision in her heart. He shook his head and said, "The tribe leader has been in power for hundreds of years. During this period, she hasn't made any wrong decisions. However, I do know something about her. If this matter is made public, she will definitely not have a chance to rise again." I was delighted and hurriedly asked what it was about. After listening to my words, he looked embarrassed. Could it be that this matter was related to him? Without waiting for me to speak, the high priestess sighed softly and told me about this matter. Ever since the tribe leader knew that the high priestess wanted to elect Yao Yao as the next tribe leader, he was somewhat resentful. However, the high priestess had a high status in the Green Hill country. Moreover, she was also a young god celestial master. Her strength was comparable to the tribe leader. Thus, the tribe leader couldn't do anything to the high priestess. She could only compete with him secretly. However, this wouldn't last long. Moreover, in the past few months, Yao Yao's strength had already broken through to the middle stage of young god celestial master. With this speed, she would soon surpass the tribe leader. Yao Yao was already a thorn in the tribe leader's side. She had to be removed as soon as possible. However, the high priestess had always protected Yao Yao. She had even brought up the Fox King. The tribe leader also didn't have a reasonable reason to kill Yao Yao. For a moment, both sides were in a deadlock. However, the longer this dragged on, the stronger Yao Yao's strength would become. The tribe leader believed that when Yao Yao's strength surpassed her, she would definitely use force to snatch the position of tribe leader. After weighing the pros and cons, the tribe leader could only shift her focus to the matter of raising her cultivation. Although her bloodline talent was already excellent in the Green Hill country, it still couldn't compare to Yao Yao. Moreover, due to the change in the Green Hill country's bloodline, after becoming a celestial master, her cultivation speed was very slow. Not to mention the cultivation after becoming a young god celestial master. The tribe leader tried everything she could, but she couldn't raise her cultivation by even a little bit. Just as she was burning with anxiety, the high priestess son told her that there was a secret technique that could help her raise her cultivation. This secret technique was passed down by the high priestess of the Green Hill country. The other tribe members didn't know how to cultivate this secret technique. This secret technique could raise a cultivator's cultivation in a very short period of time, but other than the high priestess, no one else could cultivate this secret technique. The mission of the high priestess was to protect the Green Hill country, and this secret technique could only be used when the Green Hill country was in danger. Although the secret technique's effect was obvious, it came at the cost of 100 years of life. The previous generations of high priestess had never used this secret technique. Firstly, it wasn't a matter of life and death for the Green Hill country, and secondly, due to the bloodline restrictions, her cultivation was not high. Even if she used the secret technique, she couldn't raise her cultivation by much. Therefore, this secret technique was gradually shelved. When the tribe leader learned of this, she didn't hesitate to ask the high priestess son to tell her how to cultivate this secret technique. She was already a late-stage young god, celestial master. If she could raise her strength to the rush realm through this secret technique, her lifespan would be greatly extended. Losing 100 years was nothing. However, the high priestess son had his own plans. Of course, he wouldn't hand over the secret technique so easily. Instead, he put forward a condition in exchange. Speaking up to this point, the high priestess looked a little embarrassed. Her words were very vague, and she seemed to be hesitating. From his appearance, I could guess that the condition wasn't anything good. However, in order to understand the situation, I still had to ask. After listening to my words, the high priestess sighed softly. My unfilial son has been in love with the tribe leader for a long time, so he used this as a reason to let the tribe leader marry him. However, the tribe leader didn't agree immediately. She only said that she would consider this matter after the matter was done. Chapter 783. After all, the child was too young, or perhaps he was blinded by love. The patriarch had lived for nearly 1,000 years and had never had a partner. From this point, it could be seen that either she didn't care about love like ordinary women, or she was picky and hadn't met anyone she liked. Wanting to trap her firmly with just a secret technique was simply wishful thinking. Moreover, the patriarch was shrewd, and his methods must be very tough. If it weren't for the fact that she hadn't completely fallen out with the high priest, the child wouldn't have survived until now. As for her saying that she would consider this matter after the matter was settled, it was just a temporary measure. If she waited until her strength increased, and once she solved Yao Yao's matter, the high priest wouldn't be able to stop her. Perhaps she could take the opportunity to eliminate the high priest. At that time, killing the child would be a piece of cake. The high priest might have thought of this as well, as he lowered his head and sighed. After today's detailed discussion, it seemed that the patriarch was determined to use force to suppress this matter. If it really came to that, it wouldn't affect her too much even if the matter of the patriarch secretly learning the high priest's secret technique was made known to the public. On the contrary, it might form a situation that would be even more difficult to resolve. In the end, Yao Yao still couldn't escape this calamity. This matter concerned her life, and I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. I turned around and looked at the evil, sacrificial spirit, asking if he could deal with the patriarch. After listening to me, he was silent for a while, as if he was weighing the pros and cons. Seeing him like this, I didn't want to make things difficult for him. Yao Yao and the high priest were both young god, celestial masters. If the two of them joined forces against the patriarch, they might have a chance of winning. Although my cultivation wasn't as good as theirs, my real strength couldn't be underestimated. I might not have the confidence to deal with the patriarch, but I was confident in dealing with the elders. The evil sacrificial spirit didn't say anything for a long time, so I told him what I was thinking and let him know my difficulties. If I didn't solve this matter, I definitely wouldn't be able to get the monster pearl. My last hope of curing the fatty would be gone. The fatty was very important to me. If I really couldn't get the monster pearl, I couldn't guarantee that I wouldn't attack the Qingqiu clan. That was the last thing the sacrificial evil spirit wanted to see. After thinking it over, he said softly, "Fine, we'll do as you say, but I won't harm her life." After hearing his words, I nodded and replied, "Don't worry, I don't have any intentions of killing her. I just want to force her to hand over the position of the clan leader to Yao Yao." Then I told the high priest that since the chief had secretly learned the secret technique, he was going to take action. Therefore, announcing this matter would not affect the final result at all. What we need to do now is to think of a way to deal with the patriarch's methods. In my opinion, there is no longer a need to act sneakily. We should announce the competition for the patriarch's position. The clansmen have their own plans. If we can gain the upper hand, then the patriarch will definitely fall into public opinion. At that time, it will be inevitable that he will attack us in a moment of desperation, and we will also have a reason to fight back. It was not impossible to take this opportunity to overthrow her. After the high priest heard what I said, his spirit was shaken. He immediately sat up and said, "That's a good idea. I'll get someone to spread the news." After he said that, he left, leaving only the three of us in the room. Yao Yao might have heard the situation from what I said, so she pulled my arm and asked, "Big brother Zhou, do you really have to do this?" Yao Yao doesn't want to be the patriarch. Yao Yao just wants to stay here and live a good life. I looked at her distressed expression and felt heartache. She still didn't understand how much of a threat the patriarch posed to her. I rubbed her head and said softly, "Yao Yao, it's not about whether you want to be the patriarch or not. Today at the Fox Palace, the patriarch said that she wanted to abolish your cultivation, but she actually wanted to find a chance to get rid of you. She has already treated you as a thorn in her flesh. She won't stop until she gets rid of you and the high priest. If I didn't come to Green Hill Country, you and the high priest wouldn't be her opponent. Can you leave the rest to Big Brother Zhou?" After Yao Yao heard what I said, although she looked reluctant, she still nodded and sat at the side without saying anything. I also quietly waited for the high priest's news. Not long after, there was a drumming sound outside. I didn't have any reaction, but Yao Yao was especially sensitive to the drumming sound. She said that in Green Hill Country, they would only beat the drums if something big happened. After hearing the drumming sound, the clansmen would rush to the Fox Palace. After hearing what she said, the first thing that came to my mind was what had happened to the patriarch. If it had been arranged by the high priest, he would have definitely brought us there earlier. I put down the tea in my hand and quickly brought Yao Yao and the evil, sacrificial spirit to the Fox Palace. Along the way, we met many clansmen who were in a hurry to go there. I stopped a young girl and asked her what had happened at the Fox Palace. The young girl didn't know the details and only said that the patriarch had something to announce. After hearing what she said, I was confused. We had left the Fox Palace for less than 2 hours. What was the patriarch up to? I couldn't figure out the reason at the moment, so I pulled Yao Yao and quickened my pace. When we were about to reach the Fox Palace, we saw that many Green Hill clansmen had gathered at the bottom of the stairs. They were whispering to each other, and I didn't know what they were discussing. However, looking at their doubtful faces, I assumed that they didn't know the specific situation. We didn't get close to the crowd, nor did we go around them to enter the Fox Palace. Instead, we watched the situation from afar. After watching for 5 minutes, the tightly shut palace doors slowly opened, and the Green Hill clan leader walked out. There were a dozen elders in plain robes behind her, and there were some familiar faces among them. However, there seemed to be one person missing. These elders were the elders that we had met earlier. Seeing that, I could roughly guess what the patriarch was going to announce. When the clansmen saw the patriarch and the elders walk out, they immediately stopped discussing and looked at the palace door. The patriarch looked around and didn't seem to notice our presence. Then she said, "I have gathered everyone here today to announce one thing. Yao Yao was originally from Tushan, and the Tushan bloodline was the traitor of the Green Hill clan. According to tradition, she was a sacrifice to the Fox King. However, the high priest used Yao Yao's advancement to the young god celestial master as an excuse to protect her life. However, traitors were traitors after all, and they couldn't be forgiven. However, after discussing with the elders, I believe that Yao Yao is still young and has no relatives in the Green Hill country. I can't bear to kill her, so I've decided to abolish her cultivation and drive her out of the Green Hill country. Does anyone have any objections to this?" When the clansmen heard that, they began to discuss again. The Green Hill clan leader was indeed scheming. Not only did he establish a magnanimous and righteous image for himself, he also used it to suppress the high priest position in the hearts of the clansmen. It could be said that he was killing two birds with one stone. After discussing for a while, someone in the crowd suddenly raised his hand and shouted that there was no objection. I paid special attention to this person. His face was very familiar. He was the high priest's son. Under his lead, people quickly echoed, and gradually, those who supported the patriarch became the majority. Those who didn't raise their hands were presumably the high priest's forces. However, they didn't dare to voice any objections. It seemed that the high priest wasn't here, and they didn't have any confidence. When the patriarch saw this scene, he smiled and waved his hand to signal the crowd to quiet down. He then said, "Since no one has any objections, then I announce that Yao Yao will be imprisoned immediately, and her cultivation will be abolished tomorrow." After saying that, he turned to return to the palace. At this moment, a voice came from afar. "I have an objection." Everyone looked towards the source of a voice and saw a high priest dressed in black flying over quickly from afar, landing on the stairs in an instant. After landing, he said to the crowd, "Yao Yao is the holy lady of the Green Hill country, and she's also the one chosen by the Fox King. Who dares to abolish her cultivation?" When these words came out, it caused another heated discussion among the crowd. Taking advantage of this, the high priest continued to state the rules of the ancestors, saying that Yao Yao was no longer an offering. Moreover, she had the Fox King's true blood in her body, and she was the one chosen by the Fox King to lead the Green Hill clan back to its peak. When he said that, he still refused to stop, and then proposed to elect Yao Yao as the next clan leader. When these words came out, it caused an uproar among the crowd. At this moment, someone finally stood up and expressed his support for Yao Yao as the next clan leader. Since someone had started, the people who originally supported the high priest also expressed their support. The people who supported the clan leader didn't want to be outdone and immediately retorted. In an instant, both parties were in a stalemate, and the crowd was extremely lively. When the high priest saw this, he looked extremely calm, as though he had expected such a situation to happen. She slowly walked down with the elder behind her. When she reached the high priest's side, she began to repeat the speech that she had made in the Fox King Palace. When she said that, the discussion among the crowd became even more intense. It seemed that the matter today would enter a stalemate again. I hurriedly brought Yao Yao and the sacrificial evil spirit over. When I landed, I shouted, "I am the god envoy of the Fox King, and I support Yao Yao as the next clan leader." When everyone heard that, they looked at us simultaneously. I didn't care about their expressions and pulled Yao Yao to stand next to the high priest. The high priest nodded at me, indicating that I had come at the right time. I didn't bother about him and wanted to see how the clan leader would respond. The clan leader was momentarily speechless, and her expression changed, as though she was trying to find an excuse. It seemed that I had made the right bet. She didn't dare to repeat what she had said in the Fox King Palace in front of her clansmen. If she were to say it out loud, it would mean that she was going against the Fox King. The high priest noticed the situation and struck while the iron was hot. He said that the clan leader had secretly learned the high priest's secret technique. After saying that, the clan leader's expression became embarrassed. As she denied it, she glared at the high priest's child. The youth was so frightened that he shivered, and he quickly retreated. The crowd was in an uproar. Perhaps they had realized the uniqueness of the secret technique. Otherwise, they wouldn't have such a reaction. Especially the high priest faction, their cheers were even louder, suppressing the opposing voices. Chapter 784. The moment the old man spoke, everyone looked at him simultaneously. The crowd silently made way for him. When the old man walked to the front of the crowd, I saw his face clearly. That person was one of the elders that we had met at the palace gate. No wonder I had noticed that an elder was missing behind the chief. It turned out that this person had been hiding in the crowd. It was obvious that the chief had arranged for him to stand up and speak now. Chief Qingxiu had probably anticipated that the situation would fall into a stalemate after the public announcement. Hence, he had arranged for the old man to stand up as a spectator and speak for justice. However, the so-called justice was only for the people of the clan to hear. As for whether it was truly fair, only the two of us would know. When the old man arrived before the crowd, the chief took the initiative to greet him. Great elder. The people of the clan followed suit. Although the high priest and Yao Yao knew that the great elder was the chief's man, they still cupped their hands in greeting. Looking at the crowd, it was obvious that the great elder had a high position in the Qingxiu clan. The high priest seemed to notice the strange expression on my face. He explained, "The great elder has lived for 1,000 years. His power is only at the complete seal celestial master rank. However, his seniority in the Qingxiu clan is very high. Even I'm only his grandson. Moreover, he has always been fair. Hence, everyone trusts him." The scene before us was indeed as the high priest had described. However, the great elder was in cahoots with Chief Qingxiu. His so-called fairness was naturally just an undeserved reputation. The corner of my lips curled. I wasn't in a hurry to speak. I wanted to see what the great elder had to say. After the great elder returned the greeting, he turned to the crowd and said, "The debate between the chief and the high priest seems to be reasonable. No one can tell who is right or wrong. However, it is not a long-term solution if this goes on. I took the liberty to think of an idea. Since we can't tell who is right or wrong, why don't we use the rules of the human race and have a duel in the arena to determine the winner? I wonder what everyone thinks of this." With that, he turned to look at us. He wore a kind smile on his face, but he couldn't hide the hint of mockery at the corner of his lips. Looks like this is Patriarch Qing Qiu's wishful thinking. Although Yao Yao's bloodline talent was high, her current cultivation level was still lower than clan leader Qingqiu's. Moreover, clan leader Qingqiu had also cultivated the high priest bloodline secret technique, so his strength was more than a level higher than Yao Yao's. Moreover, life and death in the arena were up to fate, and no one was allowed to interfere. This put an end to the possibility of sacrificial evil spirits participating in the battle. Great Elder proposed this kind of seemingly fair solution, but in fact it is clear that he wants to put Yao Yao to death. Seeing that everyone was about to open their mouths to agree, I hastily stood up and shook my head. The difference in power between Yao Yao and the clan leader is too great. Furthermore, the martial arts competition has always been a method used by the human race to eradicate their opponents. It isn't suitable for our monster race. Great Elder, please think of another way. When the Great Elder saw that I had rejected him, he wasn't surprised. Instead, he turned his head and cupped his hands towards me. "Lord God's envoy, your words are incorrect. Since the High Priest has declared that Yao Yao is the person chosen by the Fox King, there must be something extraordinary about her. There is indeed a slight difference in cultivation between her and the clan leader, but the difference in power can't be determined by cultivation alone. Just like you only seem to have the cultivation of a seal celestial master, but in terms of power, I'm afraid that you won't lose to an ordinary young god celestial master. Hence, this martial art competition method is the most fair choice." I wasn't surprised by his rebuttal, but I frowned when I heard him speak of my true power. Could it be that the clan leader Qing Qiu had specially investigated me? Hearing what the Great Elder said, the Qing Qiu clansmen below started to discuss. They should have already realized that if this matter continued to be in a stalemate, it would definitely have a huge impact on the country of Qingqiu. The method that the Great Elder had mentioned could indeed resolve the problem quickly, and on the surface, it seemed to be rather fair. Hence, the two powers that had been arguing earlier had already started to whisper to each other. The situation was already developing in the direction that the clan leader had predicted. Seeing that the situation was getting out of our control, the high priest softly asked me what I should plan to do next. At that moment, I was hesitant. Yao Yao naturally wasn't the clan leader Qingqiu's opponent, but if we were to directly fall out with him, even if we managed to suppress the clan leader Qingqiu, it would be difficult for Yao Yao to get along with the Qingqiu clansmen in the future. As I was pondering, the great elder of Qingqiu had already walked to the staircase. He cupped his hands at the crowd below and said, "Since no one has any objections, this matter is decided. I will be so bold as to let me take charge of this matter. How about we compete here in 3 days?" The clan leader Qingqiu naturally didn't have any objections and quickly cupped his hands in agreement. After she had confirmed it, all the Qingqiu clansmen focused their attention on Yao Yao and the high priest. At that moment, the high priest was already looking at me anxiously, waiting for my final decision. I hesitated for a moment, but in the end, I decided that I couldn't let Yao Yao kill herself and the Qingqiu clansmen, so I nodded at the high priest. After receiving my decision, the high priest was stunned. He seemed to be confused, but under everyone's gaze, he didn't ask any further. He turned his head hesitantly and represented Yao Yao to accept the great elder's suggestion. After agreeing on this matter, we didn't need to stay here any longer. After bidding farewell to the clan leader Qingqiu, we left the Fox King Palace and returned to the high priest's residence. On the way, Yao Yao was silent. It wasn't difficult to see that she was very worried at that moment. However, she had promised me that she would let me handle this matter, so she didn't mention anything to me. However, the high priest, who was following behind me, kept muttering in a low voice. He sighed after a few steps, his face full of pessimism. After returning to his residence, he immediately closed the door and asked me why I had agreed to the competition and if I had a plan to deal with it. I couldn't blame him for being so anxious. The high priest and I both knew about Yao Yao's situation. She was at the middle stage of the Yang spirit realm, so her strength couldn't be considered weak. However, the problem was that she was still young. Although she had cultivation, she didn't have any actual combat experience. If she were to really fight against an enemy, it was hard to say how much of her strength she could use. On the other hand, the clan leader Qingqiu was an old fox who had lived for hundreds of years. He had rich combat experience, and his cultivation was above Yao Yao's. In terms of combat power, the two of them weren't on the same level. The high priest was anxious, but I was calm. I didn't reply to him, but turned to ask Yao Yao if she had practiced any special techniques. Yao Yao was from the Tushan clan, after all, and she had the Fox King's true blood. She might have some extraordinary abilities. If she could tap into her own strength, that would naturally be the best. However, Yao Yao's words quickly dispelled my thoughts. She told me that the techniques she practiced were taught by her mother. She was no different from the ordinary members of the Qingqiu clan. I couldn't do anything about her. I recalled that the death scripture had recorded many special techniques, but none of them were suitable for the monster race. Besides, the monster refining gourd could help Yao Yao increase her cultivation in a short period of time. However, since the fatty wasn't here, the monster refining gourd naturally couldn't be used. As I pondered, I glanced at the high priest, who had his head lowered in contemplation. I couldn't help but recall the secret technique that he had mentioned earlier. Since the secret technique had been secretly learned by the patriarch, the rule was broken. If Yao Yao practiced it with her innate talent, she might make great progress in 3 days. Of course, the high priest wouldn't refuse. He immediately nodded in agreement. Although the secret technique was an inheritance of the high priest's bloodline, the situation was special, and he couldn't care less about it. With the secret technique, I felt a little more confident, but it wasn't enough to put my mind at ease. Yao Yao still didn't have any battle experience. After much consideration, I asked the evil sacrificial spirit for help. Among the three of us, only his power could completely suppress Yao Yao. Yao Yao's potential could only be stimulated when she was at an absolute disadvantage. I had experienced this before. The evil sacrificial spirit nodded and agreed. Since there was some progress, I didn't delay any longer. I planned to ask Yao Yao and the evil sacrificial spirit to find a remote place to train. As for the secret technique, I would leave it to the night to practice. After listening to my arrangement, no one objected. The evil sacrificial spirit and I weren't familiar with the terrain of the Green Hill country. So, the high priest led the way, and we found a spacious place with few people. To prevent the fight between the evil sacrificial spirit and Yao Yao from disturbing our clansmen, and also to prevent the chief from sending people to monitor us, I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to set up a barrier around this area to isolate us from the outside world. He was powerful, so it was easy for him to do that. Before we started, I took out the armored dismantling sword from the Xianglu pouch and handed it to Yao Yao. The reason why I agreed to the competition was that I wanted Yao Yao to use the armored dismantling sword and use its power to defeat the chief of the Green Hill country. Originally, I even wanted to let her use the Xianyuan sword. After all, the power of the Xianyuan sword was stronger. But then, I changed my mind. The Xianyuan sword was the Yellow Emperor's magic weapon. The ancient war was the result of the conflict between humans and demons. Although the Green Hill country didn't participate in the war, I couldn't guarantee that it wasn't recorded. If I took out the Xianyuan sword, the high priest would be suspicious. Of course, I could make up a reason to fool him. But during the competition, if the chief recognized the Xianyuan sword, it would be hard to say what would happen. After careful consideration, I decided to rule out the Xianyuan sword. I thought about it carefully and decided to rule it out. As for Yao Yao, she couldn't use the armor dismantling sword properly at first. In addition to the difference in power, she was being suppressed by the evil, sacrificial spirit. Fortunately, she was talented and had the Fox King's blood in her body. She quickly adapted to the situation. She could only defend herself, but she could occasionally counterattack. Although the evil sacrificial spirit didn't use his full power, I estimated that I wouldn't be able to last long if I were to fight him. In other words, Yao Yao's power wasn't any weaker than mine. The Grand Priest looked at Yao Yao, who was in the midst of the battle, and his face was filled with gratification. He was even more certain that Yao Yao was the one to lead the Green Hill country back to its peak. We didn't go out for 3 days. Yao Yao fought with the evil sacrificial spirit during the day to accumulate battle experience. At night, she cultivated the secret technique with the high priest. In just a few days, her power had improved by leaps and bounds, and her battle experience was mature. Chapter 785. Looking at Yao Yao's rapid progress, I had a higher chance of winning. After removing the barrier, I gestured for Yao Yao to suppress her cultivation to the state she was at 3 days ago to prevent the chief from noticing anything wrong. The three of us quickly flew towards the Fox King Palace. From afar, we could see many people gathered at the palace gate. They were waiting for the competition to begin. There were many lively people in the crowd who started to guess the result of the competition. Most of them thought that the chief would win and didn't forget to belittle Yao Yao. It was obvious that the chief had purposely arranged for these people to create momentum for him. If it was 3 days ago, I might have believed such words. However, it was different now. Yao Yao's power was probably on par with the chief's. It was hard to predict who would win this competition. When the people saw us rushing over, they quickly made way. I saw that there was already an arena set up in front of the crowd. There were also dozens of chairs placed around it. It looked rather formal. At that moment, the chief and the others had yet to appear. The chairs in front were empty. I didn't stand on ceremony and brought everyone to their seats. I waited for the chief in silence. After a short while, the palace gate opened and a group of people walked out. The leader was the chief. She was still in her previous attire. However, she looked relaxed as though she had a high chance of winning this competition. Following behind her were naturally the elders. However, the great elder was also among them. As matters stood, he didn't need to hide anymore. Looking at the situation, I didn't dare to be careless. I glanced at the evil, sacrificial spirit and asked about the chief's cultivation. She had cultivated the secret technique of the high priest's family. She had probably improved. The evil, sacrificial spirit looked at the chief without changing his expression. Just the peak of a young god, celestial master. Hearing his reply, I was slightly surprised. I remembered that when I came here, the chief was only at the late stage of a young god celestial master. I didn't expect her to reach the peak in just a few days. It seemed that the secret technique was interesting. If I didn't cultivate Tao Chi and Shaman Chi, I would also want to learn that secret technique. Then, I asked her about Yao Yao's current cultivation. Previously, I was busy with the journey and was worried about the competition, so I didn't ask about it. Now that the clan leader's strength had improved so much, he couldn't help but feel uncertain. The evil sacrificial spirit first looked at Yao Yao, who was next to me. His eyes seemed to be gratified. After he retracted his gaze, he said, "Slightly better." Hearing this, I was overwhelmed with shock. In other words, now that Yao Yao had the cultivation of a young god heavenly master, in time, she would be able to advance to the next level. The sacrificial evil spirit might have sensed my thoughts and told me that there was more than a thin line between the consummate young god celestial master and ascension. If he wanted to advance to the next rank, he would need a great opportunity. For the monster clan, it was even more difficult. Whether or not Yao Yao could cross over would depend on her luck. Even so, I was amazed by her progress. Back then, when she was sent back to the Green Hill country, she was only at the peak of wisdom glory. After not seeing him for a few months, he was already a young god celestial master. In just 3 days, he was already a perfected young god celestial master. If I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I definitely wouldn't have believed that Yao Yao could have such cultivation speed. Even I, who had 2 types of powers and a godly weapon, could only look at her back. While we were talking, the clan leader and his entourage had already walked down from the palace entrance to the side of the arena. When the clansmen behind him saw this, they immediately bowed. Yao Yao and the head priest wanted to stand up, but I extended my hand to stop them. Since things had already come to this, there was no reason to show mercy. Seeing my action, the clan leader's expression darkened as she looked over. When her gaze swept across Yao Yao, she revealed a smile, her eyes filled with disdain. Looking at her expression, my intention of hinting Yao Yao to suppress her cultivation had been achieved. As the saying goes, all is fair in war. Since the clan leader was so scheming, I could only use some tricks to deal with her. The great elder was the one to host the competition. After everyone had taken their seats, he stood up and cupped his hands towards the clan leader. Then he walked in front of us and bowed. I didn't have any enmity towards this person. As we were in different positions, the way we did things was different. His previous words and actions were under the orders of the clan leader. As for his true thoughts, it wasn't hard to tell from the way he bowed to us, as expected of someone who had lived for 1,000 years. He was dependable, and his vision was different from others. He could probably tell that he had a chance of winning today's competition, so he chose not to offend either side. Bowing to us was an expression of goodwill. I could understand his intentions. Since he had done that, I wasn't arrogant anymore. I stood up and returned the greeting. Yao Yao and the head priest did the same. He smiled and nodded before taking large strides towards the arena. After he stood still, the clansmen immediately quieted down and looked at the arena. The great elder didn't waste any time and directly announced a few things to take note of. Just as I had predicted, life and death in the arena is determined by fate. You can't use the power outside the arena. As he said that, he slowly walked down the arena and returned to his seat. He nodded at the clan leader. After the clan leader responded, he stood up and flew up the arena. Yao Yao wanted to follow, but I pulled her back. Seeing that I was suspicious, I whispered into her ear, "You don't have to feel burdened. Just treat it as a simple competition. If you really can't win, just jump down. I will protect you." Even though Yao Yao's power was slightly higher, the clan leader was scheming and would definitely use some underhanded means. After she heard that, she nodded slightly and walked up with the armor-removing sword. When the clan leader saw the armor-removing sword in Yao Yao's hand, his expression changed. He looked at me and said, "God's envoy, if I didn't remember wrongly, that sword is your magic instrument." Previously, the Great Elder had already said that you can't use external power. I'm afraid it's inappropriate for you to give her this sword. Seeing that she was making things difficult for me, my expression didn't change. I already had an excuse in my heart. I replied, "That sword is indeed my magic instrument. However, when I came to Green Hill Country, I gave it to Yao Yao. Could it be that the Lord Clan leader wants me to give her a gift?" After the clan leader heard that, his expression turned gloomy and he could only give up. He turned to look at Yao Yao and said, "You're just a little girl in the middle stage of the Yang God Celestial Master stage. You can't hurt me with a broken sword. Today, I will kill you, the traitor, and turn your bones into ashes." Facing the clan leader's malicious words, Yao Yao's expression didn't change. She took a stance and was about to face the enemy. The clan leader didn't delay. She shook her arms, and the monstrous aura on her body surged. With her, as the center, a gust of wind swept through the entire stage. The range of the gust grew larger and larger. It looked like it was going to affect the people below the stage. At that moment, the evil sacrificial spirit waved his hand and drew a barrier in the air, wrapping the three of us inside. As for the clansmen behind us, we didn't care. The elders also used their own methods to protect themselves. However, their expressions were extremely awkward, and they looked like they were having a hard time. The clan leader's means were really powerful. With just one move, he made the elders with the strength of a celestial master fall into such a predicament. However, this move alone wasn't enough to hurt Yao Yao. She held her sword in front of her chest with both hands and used her monstrous aura to wrap her body. The clan leader wasn't anxious when he saw that his attack didn't work. He slowly walked toward Yao Yao. With every step he took, his aura became stronger. After a few steps, the gust became stronger. I couldn't see what was going on inside with my naked eyes. Seeing that, I was a little worried. With Yao Yao's strength, the gust couldn't hurt her. However, I was afraid that the clan leader would use Yao Yao's pure mind to play some tricks on her after blocking everyone's sight. However, after 3 to 5 seconds, the gust was broken. Yao Yao stood firmly in the same place, while the high priest stood in front of her. It seemed that I had worried too much. Yao Yao was really cautious. The clan leader was surprised when he saw Yao Yao break his gust so easily. However, his expression changed immediately. He stared at Yao Yao, and the monstrous aura on his body increased a little. Seeing that, I didn't dare to let Yao Yao hide her strength anymore. I hurriedly reminded her not to suppress her cultivation base. Yao Yao didn't hesitate. She closed her eyes, and her aura changed. The clan leader felt Yao Yao's change. His eyes were filled with disbelief. However, this wasn't enough to scare her. She took the opportunity when Yao Yao broke the seal. She quickly pounced forward. Her white furry claw aimed at Yao Yao's neck. She was about to succeed. At this moment, Yao Yao glared angrily. She raised her sword to block in front of her chest. Then, she moved sideways and dodged the attack. Seeing that his attack had missed, the clan leader was visibly angrier. Both of her hands turned into fox claws. Her eyes turned scarlet. She bared her fox teeth and was about to bite Yao Yao's body. Yao Yao's speed was fast. She lifted her leg and kicked her waist. At the same time, she swung the armor dismantling sword. The clan leader had seen the power of the armor dismantling sword. It was even more powerful in Yao Yao's hands. She didn't dare to take it head on. She hurriedly stopped and dodged to the side. Yao Yao didn't show any mercy. She channeled her monstrous aura into the armor dismantling sword and slashed in the direction where the clan leader dodged. Perhaps she knew that the sword chi would also be dodged by the clan leader. She seemed to have predicted it. There was wind under her feet. In a blink of an eye, she arrived at a spot. As expected, after the clan leader dodged the sword, she flew to the side. Unexpectedly, Yao Yao was already standing there. Yao Yao swung her sword again. The clan leader didn't have time to react. She was hit by the sword. My eyes brightened. It seemed that fighting with the evil, sacrificial spirit for the past 3 days had given her a lot of experience. Although the clan leader was hit, it wasn't enough to hurt her. She hurriedly stopped and dispelled the sword energy on her body. Her scarlet eyes looked like they were about to bleed. She didn't expect Yao Yao to have such a trick. Of course, clan leader Qingqiu wouldn't just sit and wait for death. Soon, she let out a sharp cry. Her body curled down. She no longer maintained her human form. She revealed her true form. Chapter 786. Along with the patriarch's shrill cry, her body suddenly leapt several feet into the air. Her clothes gradually blurred, and by the time she landed on the ground, she had already transformed into a snow-white fox. When I first came to Qingqiu country, I had met a three-tailed fox monster and fought with her. After the fox monsters transformed into their true forms, their powers were even stronger. The three-tailed fox monster was only at the peak stage of glory of knowledge, but I had to use both Tao and witch essence to defeat her. After the chief had transformed into her true form, her huge body surprised me. After observing for a while, I realized that the chief had 6 tails. According to my speculation, the number of tails would increase as the cultivation base of the fox monster increased. A fox monster at the peak stage of glory of knowledge had 3 tails, which meant that there was a difference of 2 levels between glory of knowledge and young god celestial master. Under normal circumstances, the clan leader would only have 5 tails. How could there be one more? While I was thinking, the high priest next to me exclaimed. From the looks of it, he seemed to have also noticed the 6 tails behind the clan leader. I was a little apprehensive. It seemed to be abnormal for the tribe leader to have such a strange change. I didn't know much about the Qingqiu country, so I had to ask the high priest if I wanted to know what was going on. I moved closer to the high priest and asked about the chief's 6 tails. After listening to me, he didn't react, but stared at the chief in her true form in the arena. He kept saying, "Impossible." The more he looked like this, the more uneasy I felt. I was anxious and asked him again. Then I pulled him out. However, he didn't retract his gaze. His eyes were full of surprise as he explained to me. His words confirmed my previous thoughts. The Qingqiu country did have the concept of a 9-tailed fox monster. Every time one's cultivation base increased, they would grow a tail. The Yang God Ascension had 6 tails. Although the half-step Shaju wasn't a major realm, it was only 1 step away from the Shaju Ascension. That was why it had 7 tails. Even in the Shaju Ascension realm, there were only 8 tails. However, the 9th tail would combine all 8 tails into one, reaching the realm of returning to the origin. Thus, the 9th tail was just a concept, not a real existence. Hearing this, I couldn't help but look up at the 6-tailed chief. Could it be that the previous judgment of the evil spirit's sacrifice was wrong, or that the chief deliberately suppressed her cultivation? In fact, she was already in the realm of Yang spirit. If it is true, Yao Yao is not her opponent. Unfortunately, my cultivation level is too low, and I can't see through the clan leader's cultivation level at all. The high priest is the same, so I can only ask the sacrificial evil spirit. After hearing my words, the evil sacrificial spirit's expression didn't change. He shook his head and replied, "She's only at the peak of the Yang God Celestial Master realm. I don't know what method she used to give birth to the 6th tail. However, the 6th tail has yet to fully grow." His words brought my attention back to the chief. When I took a closer look, it was indeed as he had said. The chief had 5 tails behind him, all of them full of fur and complete shapes. However, one of its tails was a little short, as if it hadn't fully developed yet. He did not know what method she had used to grow her 6th tail ahead of time. It seemed that he had underestimated this clan leader. Yao Yao, who was on the stage, seemed to have sensed this as her expression turned somewhat solemn. In the previous 2 exchanges, it seemed that luck had played a part in her being able to resolve the chief's attack. However, she couldn't be careless now. After the chief had transformed into her original form, her power was even stronger. She was already at the peak of the Yang God Celestial Master realm, which was no weaker than her. After the chief landed, she grinned, revealing her fox teeth as she glared at Yao Yao. After a while, she stomped on the ground with her hind legs and leaped into the air. However, she didn't pounce on her directly. Instead, she spun her body in the air. Following her movements, a strong wind blew in the surroundings. In the strong wind, countless silver threads appeared out of nowhere and headed towards Yao Yao. Under the strong wind, the silver threads were extremely fast. They were like countless silver needles, emitting a chilling aura. Even though I was sitting below the stage, I felt as if my surroundings had fallen into an ice cellar. Yao Yao was stunned. It seemed that she had never seen such a method before. However, she didn't dare to be negligent. She raised the armor-removing sword in front of her chest to block the silver threads that were heading toward her face. Immediately after, she spat out a pink smoke that enveloped her. Previously, when I was fighting against the three-tailed fox monster, I had also seen this method. The pink smoke wasn't ordinary. It was the innate divine ability of the Green Hill Fox clan. Its power was different, and it could change into thousands of forms. Not only could it be used as a weapon, but it could also be used as a defensive method. As for the barrier formed by the pink smoke, I didn't know how strong its resistance was. I saw the silver threads madly twining around Yao Yao's pink barrier. In a short while, Yao Yao had become an airtight silver sphere. In the blink of an eye, there was a scream from within the sphere. I was shocked. Could Yao Yao be injured? However, the sphere hadn't dispersed yet, so I couldn't see the situation inside. Just as I was worried about Yao Yao's safety, the silver sphere suddenly exploded and a white fox jumped out. The fox's eyes were scarlet red, and it only had one tail. It was Yao Yao's original form. Yao Yao was from the Tushan clan, and she was the most respected existence in the Green Hill Fox clan. The most obvious difference between her and the others was that she only had one tail, regardless of her cultivation base. Since Yao Yao had turned into her original form, there was nothing she could do. When the clan leader saw this, she immediately pounced. Her claws reached for Yao Yao's body, and her mouth opened wide, aiming for her neck. After the two of them had turned into their original forms, they didn't have any moves to speak of. They had to use the most primitive means of attack. In such a situation, cultivation base was secondary. What mattered most was their instincts. Although the clan leader had lived for almost 1,000 years, due to her bloodline, Yao Yao had an innate ability to suppress her. Thus, she quickly fell into a disadvantageous position. Not only that, but Yao Yao had also bitten off one of her tails. After losing one of her tails, the clan leader was obviously severely injured. She lay on the ground and wailed. Looking at her broken tail, her bloodshot eyes looked like they were about to bleed. Yao Yao didn't intend to let her go. She seized the opportunity and chased after her. Perhaps the clan leader realized that she wasn't Yao Yao's match anymore. She hurriedly stood up and dodged Yao Yao's charge. Since her attack had failed, Yao Yao became even faster. In an instant, the stage was filled with a chase. Neither of them could succeed again. However, running and chasing for a long time would consume a lot of stamina. Especially the clan leader who had lost one of her tails, her stamina was obviously declining. After chasing for tens of seconds, the clan leader finally slowed down. Yao Yao took this opportunity and directly pounced on it, and with one bite, she ripped off another 3 tails. The clan leader was in pain and didn't dare to slow down anymore. However, she was severely injured and her stamina was declining rapidly. Finally, she fell on the stage and couldn't stand up for a long time. Since then, Yao Yao has won this competition. She turned around and transformed into her human form. She walked to the clan leader and said faintly, "Brother Zhou said that he wouldn't harm your life." Then, Yao Yao turned around and slowly walked down the stage to my side. The evil sacrificial spirits saw that and immediately removed the barrier in front of him. I hurried to ask if Yao Yao was injured. Unexpectedly, before I could speak, Yao Yao's body went soft and fell to the ground. My heart tightened. I hurried to help her up and called her softly. However, she didn't respond. She seemed to have fainted. I couldn't check on her injuries at the moment and was very anxious. The evil sacrificial spirit saw that I was like that and walked over to put both of his hands on Yao Yao's abdomen. After a long time, he said to me, "It's nothing serious. It's just some internal injuries." She fainted due to exhaustion. After hearing his words, I calmed down. However, I didn't hurry to leave. I carried Yao Yao back to the chair and handed her over to the evil sacrificial spirit to help her recover. There was another important matter, which was to hear the great elder announce the result of the battle. Although the result of the battle was obvious, the great elder was the host of the battle. It was best to hear him announce the result with his own ears. At that moment, the clansmen who had been blown away by the strong wind had returned. When they saw the fox with several broken tails lying on the stage, they couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. The result was out of their expectations. I sat at my original position and didn't care about the commotion behind me. I looked at the great elder's seat. I saw that he had an amiable face and didn't look surprised at all. He walked in front of me and clasped his hands to congratulate me. Then, he walked to the stage and announced the result of the battle. The clansmen had already seen the result, so they weren't too surprised. However, at this moment, a strange voice could be heard. Impossible. When that voice was heard, there was an additional figure on the stage. It was the great priest child. He was squatting in front of the clan leader and hugging her body as he cried loudly. When the great priest saw that, he couldn't maintain his composure and hastily ordered him to come down. How could the youth listen to him? He didn't care about how the clansmen looked at him as he hugged the clan leader's body and shook her. When the clansmen saw that, they started to discuss softly. In the blink of an eye, the great elder had already returned to his seat. However, the other elders who were sitting beside him were nowhere to be seen. I didn't care about that and walked to the stage. I said to the clansmen, "Since Yao Yao won the battle today, then according to the previous agreement, the position of the clan leader will be held by Yao Yao from now on." When I said that, the great priest faction started to shout. However, those who originally supported the clan leader had an extremely embarrassed expression as they stayed silent in the crowd. Chapter 787. Following the voice, a strong gust of wind rose up from behind me, heading straight for me. I didn't dare to be careless. I picked up the armor remover sword and turned around to face the enemy. The person who launched the sneak attack was obviously the Qingqiu tribe leader that Yao Yao had defeated. She was still in her snow fox form. Her sharp claws were in front of her as she charged at me. Before she reached me, her mouth was filled with the stench of blood. It made my stomach churn. I suppressed the disgust in my heart and held the armor remover's sword to dodge the attack. Unexpectedly, she turned around and tried to grab my neck again. At that moment, the sacrificial evil spirit's cold voice resounded from below the stage. "Presumptuous!" In an instant, the fox flew out and hit the ground hard. Her forelegs twitched a few times before she stopped moving. I had wanted to spare the sacrificial evil spirit's life because I didn't expect the sacrificial evil spirit to make a move on her own. It seemed that she knew what I was thinking, so she didn't want to make things difficult for me. The high priest child glared at me with bloodshot eyes when he saw that the tribe leader was dead. He roared, "I will kill you." Then, he wanted to charge at me. This person really didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. What could a seal celestial master do to me? Before I could make a move, the high priest had already jumped onto the stage. He waved his hand, and a gust of wind swept the youth away. He was nowhere to be seen. The high priest knelt in front of me and begged for mercy for the youth. He was quite clever. The youth had offended me earlier, and I should have been sentenced to death. Hence, he waved his hand to sweep him away. Then, he begged for mercy for him to appease the anger in me. Perhaps I would spare his son's life. If I insisted on killing him now, the high priest probably wouldn't have any complaints. However, I couldn't stay in Qingqiu country forever. Although Yao Yao won today and became the tribe leader, she was simple-minded and would need the high priest care in the future. If I kill his son, after I leave, even if he doesn't plan to take revenge, at least he won't do his best to help Yao Yao like he is doing now. I waved my hand to get the high priest to stand up indicating that I didn't have any intention to kill him. After the high priest thanked me, he followed me down the stage. I returned to my original spot and asked about Yao Yao's current situation. He said that Yao Yao is fine now. She just needs to rest well. I nodded and carried Yao Yao. I walked around the stage and headed straight for the Fox King Palace. Since Yao Yao was the new clan leader, from now on, the Fox Palace would naturally be her residence. Not long after returning to the Fox King Palace, the Great Elder walked in. He first cupped his hands at me, then asked about Yao Yao's injuries. After getting my reply, he thumped his chest and stamped his feet, pretending to be relieved. Although his appearance was disgusting, since Yao Yao wanted to be the tribe leader, she had to ally with everyone she could ally with. I didn't mind. Instead, I asked about the situation on the arena where the Qingqiu tribe leader had 6 tails. I was curious about this and asked the high priest about it, but he didn't know either. This great elder was the former patriarch's faction, so he might know a thing or two. Moreover, he had come to express goodwill, so he had to contribute something. In addition, the former patriarch was already dead, so there was no need to hide this matter. Thinking about this, I asked about it. According to him, the reason why the former patriarch had 6 tails was that she had absorbed the monster pearl that the Qingqiu tribe had kept for thousands of years. The monster pearl could provide a huge amount of energy. The former patriarch was already at the peak of the Yang God Celestial Master rank, so she thought that the monster pearl could help her advance successfully. However, advancing didn't just require a huge amount of energy, it also required great opportunities. Hence, after she had absorbed the monster pearl, she realized that she couldn't advance, so she could only use the energy in her body to form the 6th foxtail. That way, she could avoid the danger of her body exploding. Hence, the 6th tail was a helpless move, and it wasn't a sign of advancement. After hearing this, I understood why her 6th tail was so short. However, I didn't expect that the monster pearl would contain such a huge amount of energy, which surprised me. Since the matter here had been resolved, I didn't want to delay any longer. I planned to ask the high priest for a monster pearl and leave after Yao Yao woke up. Unexpectedly, the high priest told me that the monster pearl was a treasure of the Qingqiu tribe and could only be kept by the current patriarch. However, the former patriarch was dead, and we couldn't find the location of the monster pearl. While I was worried, the great elder told me that the monster pearl didn't have many monster pearls left in the Qingqiu tribe, and the former patriarch had refined them all. After listening to this, I was a little surprised. I didn't expect that the fox monster would pay so much. It seemed that if I wanted to get the monster pearl, I would have to break her body. With this thought, I didn't linger and hurried to the previous arena. Fortunately, the fox monster's body wasn't taken away. It seemed that the tribe members were sensible. If anyone were to take away her corpse without permission, they would be criticized by others. The body was fine, but I was worried about how to take the monster pearl. While I was thinking, the evil priest walked forward and reached out to grab the fox monster's body. He didn't say anything, but when he returned, he gave me a fist-sized monster pearl. The monster pearl was white, and when I held it in my hand, I could feel a warm current flowing through it. From these 2 points, I could tell that it wasn't an ordinary item. I didn't look at it carefully and put it away. Then, I hurried back to the Fox King Palace. Not long after, Yao Yao woke up. I told her that I had to leave immediately as the fatty was waiting for me to save his life. At first, she wanted to ask me to stay, but when I mentioned the fatty, she didn't try to persuade me anymore. She just told me to bring the fatty back to see her after his wounds were healed. I nodded, then left with a sacrificial evil spirit. After we left the Green Dragon Mountain, I contacted the fatty and asked him about his body condition. After learning that he was all right, I felt relieved. However, we didn't stop and took a taxi to Mount Yellow Crown. When we arrived, it was already the next morning. The fatty came to meet us at the foot of the mountain. His face was even paler than it had been a few days ago. It seemed he hadn't told me the truth on the phone. I didn't ask him again. I was afraid that if I asked him again, he would just brush me off. Once I met Master Guan, I would know the details. When the fatty saw us, he wasn't as excited as the last time. On the contrary, he was curious. From his appearance, It seemed that Master Guan hadn't told him about it yet. After the fatty led us to the main hall, he retreated. When Master Guan saw me, he was delighted. He came to greet me and asked, "Nephew, did you succeed?" I quickly took out the monster core from the Shangliu pouch and replied, "Junior was lucky and didn't disappoint you." Then, I handed the monster core to him. When Master Guan saw the monster core, his eyes lit up. However, he quickly regained his composure and carefully examined it. After a long time, he said, "There's a huge amount of energy inside. This is indeed the monster core." After he said that, he cupped his hands to thank me. Seeing him like that, I didn't dare to neglect him. I quickly returned his greeting and asked him how confident he was in treating the fatty. After pondering for a while, Master Guan said, "My divination sect only knows how to perform divinations. I don't know much about curing people. Fortunately, a few days ago, Junior Marshal Brother told me about a method that can restore my disciple's meridians. However, if I want my disciple to fully recover, I will need Nephew's help." After listening to him, I was startled. It wasn't because he wanted my help, but because Master Guan had mentioned his Junior Marshal Brother. If I remember correctly, Master Guan only had one Junior Marshal Brother, and that was Nangong. If that was the case, Nangong had returned a few days ago. That was good. I could ask him about what happened on Mount Lao. Since I was worried about the sect leader of Mount Lao, I asked Master Guan about Nangong's whereabouts. Unexpectedly, he told me that Nangong had left Mount Huangguan before me and that I didn't know where he had gone. His words disappointed me. It seemed that Nangong already knew that I would come to Mount Huangguan today. If I missed him this time, I wouldn't know when I would be able to find him again. It seemed that he had done this on purpose. I also didn't know why he had been hiding from me. After pondering for a long time, I couldn't figure out the reason. I didn't want to dwell on this matter any longer and put it aside for the time being. Then, I asked Master Guan about his request for my help. Daoist Guan didn't linger and told me the key points in detail. According to him, before he left, Nangong had told me that if I wanted to repair the fatty's tendons and veins of the heavens, I would have to transfer a large amount of Dao energy to his body. Since the amount needed was too great, even the amount of Dao energy in Yang Shun Heavenly Master's body was far from enough. Therefore, the only feasible method was to find a true dragon's vein and use it to connect the shattered veins of the heavens in the fatty's body. Then, I would have to use the monster core and the secret technique that Nangong had told me to heal the fatty's injuries. However, the fatty's body was deteriorating, and it was too late to find the true dragon's vein. Therefore, Master Guan could only ask me to borrow the jade bracelet on my chest. Master Guan also knew about the existence of the dragon's vein in my jade bracelet. Previously, when I was sealing the acupoints, the dragon's vein was absorbed by the jade bracelet. Later, in order not to be discovered, Master Guan asked the fatty to use the 5 emperor coins to seal the dragon's aura. However, his words made sense. If we didn't use the dragon energy in the jade bracelet, we would have to find the true dragon's vein. Although there were many in Wangwu Heavenly Cave, the road to Mount Wangwu was too long, and the fatty's body wouldn't be able to hold on for too long. If something unexpected happened on the way, it would delay us even more. With that thought, I took the jade bracelet off my chest and handed it to Master Guan. Although I didn't know what kind of secret technique Master Guan had mentioned or why he needed such a large amount of dragon energy to heal the fatty, it would inevitably affect Tong Tong during the process. Out of consideration for Tong Tong's safety, I called her out. After seeing Tong Tong, Master Guan didn't have much of a reaction. He just looked at her with interest and asked me, "Inbornine fetus?" I trusted Master Guan and didn't want to hide anything from him. I nodded and smiled. Master Guan didn't pay attention to Tong Tong. He nodded and asked me to take a rest while he went to prepare. I had retrieved the monster core and given the jade bracelet to Master Guan. I didn't need to get involved in the fatty's affairs. I stayed in the main hall for a while, but Master Guan didn't make any movements. Seeing that there was nothing to do, I took the evil sacrificial spirit and Tong Tong to stroll around the Yellow Crown Mountain. Around 2 hours later, I had walked around the west side of the Yellow Crown Mountain and was about to rest in the Heavenly Dipper Pavilion. At this time, a Taoist child caught up with me and told me that Master Guan wanted to see me. Chapter 788. The fatty's matter was very important, so I didn't linger and followed the Taoist child to the Tianyi monastery. Master Guan and the fatty were already waiting for me in the main hall. When the fatty saw me, he looked a little nervous. It was obvious that he knew about the monster core. Jinren Guan hastily stood up. When he saw the monster core in my hand, his face lit up with joy. However, after receiving it, he told me that the monster core couldn't be consumed directly by the fatty. Instead, I had to stimulate the energy within it and let the fatty slowly absorb it. This process would take around 3 days. During this time, he hoped that I could protect him. From what he said, it seemed that there would be some dangers during this process. After asking, Master Guan nodded and told me the key point of the 7th middle school. According to him, when we were treating the fatty, we had to stimulate the energy in the monster core. Since the monster core contained a lot of energy, it was very attractive to spirits and ghosts. It was hard to guarantee that no monster would come to snatch the monster core. Although the Tianyi monastery was protected by a formation that prevented ordinary monsters and demons from approaching, I had to protect him just in case. This was the only way to ensure that nothing would go wrong. Master Guan's suggestion was very reliable, so I didn't hesitate and agreed. After everything was settled, he clasped his hands at me and said, "I need to take the fatty to make some preparations. Later, I'll start to treat the fatty. As for me, I just needed to pay attention to the surroundings and not stray too far away." Then, he took the fatty around the main hall and went to the inner room. Before we left, I pulled the fatty and comforted him. "Don't be too nervous." Actually, I was a little curious as well. The Zhanshi faction's techniques were miraculous, but they were still within the realm of Dao Qi. However, the Yao Dan contained pure demonic qi. Using demonic qi to heal the fatty's injuries was highly likely to involve the transformation of 2 powers. I couldn't help but recall the true dragon veins transformation formation from 1,000 years ago that I had seen in Shenzhen. 1,000 years ago, Prime Minister Wen had needed such a huge project to transform wizard energy and Dao energy. I wondered what kind of method Master Guan would use this time. Although I yearned for it, the fatty's safety was more important. I suppressed my curiosity and brought the sacrificial evil spirit and Tong Tong out of the hall. I wanted to take a look around. Not long after I left, a layer of yellow smoke rose from the sky above the Tianyi monastery, creating something that looked like a barrier. This isn't the first time I've seen this barrier. Previously, outside the Spirit Lock Pagoda, Fatty had used this barrier to resist Monk Miaojue, who was at the Heavenly Master Seal realm. Based on this, the barrier should be able to resist the mountain spirits and ghosts below the Yangshan phase. If a mountain spirit or ghost with Yang spirit cultivation breaks through the barrier, I will be needed. Of course, with my strength alone, I can deal with 1 or 2 evil creatures in the Yangshan realm. If there are more, I have to ask the evil spirit and Tong Tong to deal with them. As for whether or not there was an evil being that had a cultivation higher than the evil sacrificial spirit, I didn't think too much about it. The evil sacrificial spirit had always been invincible. As long as he was here, he would definitely be able to protect the fatty. I felt relaxed and continued to wander around the Tianyi monastery with the evil sacrificial spirit and Tong Tong. At the same time, I paid attention to the surroundings. Around 1 hour later, I sensed a strong wave of energy coming from the direction of the hall. It seemed Jinren Guan had started. This wave of energy wasn't Dao energy, nor was it monster energy. It seemed to be pure spiritual energy. This spiritual energy had a strong attraction to everything in the world, and it was the best tonic for ghosts and monsters. It was no wonder why Jinren Guan had been so serious earlier. Since Jinren Guan had started, I was afraid that the Tianyi monastery wouldn't be peaceful for the next 3 days. As soon as I thought about this, a loud explosion came from above. This sound was especially clear in the enclosed Yellow Crown Mountain. Coincidentally, we turned to look at the source of the sound. We saw a monster with a grimacing face lying in midair, punching the pale yellow barrier. This monster's strength was only at the ghost general realm. It wasn't strong enough to shake the barrier. After a while, it seemed to be exhausted. However, it didn't want to give up. It opened its big mouth, wanting to use its sharp black teeth to break the barrier. Unfortunately, it was too weak. In the end, it didn't succeed. It could only leave while swaying its body. In the next few hours, more and more demonic ghosts arrived, attempting to break through the barrier. Although they had tried their best, they couldn't even shake the barrier. They had to leave resentfully. It seemed the barrier protecting the Tiani monastery wasn't ordinary. Ordinary monsters couldn't break it. However, I didn't dare to be careless. It was just the first day, and so many ghosts and monsters had come. I didn't know what would happen in the future. Fortunately, nothing unexpected happened on the second day. The number of ghosts and monsters was several times more than the first day. However, there was still no Yang spirit realm cultivator. They couldn't break the yellow barrier. However, on the morning of the third day, the situation changed. All of a sudden, a loud explosion came from the barrier. It was much louder than the previous ones, and the entire Yellow Crown Mountain was shaking. I immediately took the evil, sacrificial spirit and tong to the barrier. As soon as we got close, we saw a dark cloud slowly descending from the sky. The aura that the dark cloud emitted made my heart sink. This kind of strength was beyond my endurance. I guess that the monster in the dark cloud had at least the middle stage of the Yang spirit celestial master realm. My face changed, but the evil, sacrificial spirit didn't change his expression. He just glanced at the dark cloud, then looked away. He signaled me to be careful. I nodded. While I was about to ask him what we should do, another loud explosion came from above. After the previous monsters had hit the barrier many times, the yellow smoke barrier had been consumed a lot. This time, with such a collision, it completely exploded. The moment the barrier collapsed, the dark cloud flashed and dashed toward the main hall. I was shocked. I wanted to call the evil, sacrificial spirit to rush into the main hall, but when I turned around, the evil, sacrificial spirit had already disappeared. In the next second, before the dark cloud could descend, the evil, sacrificial spirit had appeared on the roof of the main hall and blocked the path of the dark cloud. The dark cloud's eyes were clear. It didn't care about the evil, sacrificial spirit blocking its way. Instead, it transformed into a human form and dashed toward the main hall. How could the evil, sacrificial spirit let it have its way? His loose black robe fluttered, and his body was wrapped in thick shaman energy. In just a blink of an eye, the entire main hall was shrouded in it. That figure sensed that something was wrong. He stopped and turned to look at the evil, sacrificial spirit. He was just a figure, and he didn't have the facial features of an ordinary person. I couldn't tell what his expression was. I had told the evil, sacrificial spirit that if it encountered something it couldn't deal with, it should defeat it as soon as possible. Thus, the evil, sacrificial spirit didn't delay. After protecting the main hall, it directly soared into the sky and attacked the figure. At this moment, the figure seemed to recognize that the evil, sacrificial spirit's power wasn't ordinary. He didn't dare to face it head-on. Just as the fist was about to hit his face, he barely managed to dodge the attack, cutting a sorry figure. The evil, sacrificial spirit wasn't enraged. The shaman energy in his hands condensed into a ball. Then he pushed it forward. It was so fast that the figure couldn't react in time. In just a blink of an eye, he was sent flying backward. At the same time, the evil, sacrificial spirit flew forward and slapped the figure's chest. With a roar, the figure turned into smoke and dust and dissipated in the air. On Mount Lao, I had seen the evil, sacrificial spirit injure the Yang god, celestial master, with one move. That figure's power seemed to be above the elders of Mount Lao. I didn't expect that the evil, sacrificial spirit could kill him so easily. This made me even more curious about the evil, sacrificial spirit's power. I wanted to know how strong he was. After the evil, sacrificial spirit landed, I chased after him and asked him about his cultivation base. He still wore a calm face and answered indifferently. He's only one step away from the Ascension God realm. Hearing this, I was startled. That figure was so powerful, but he couldn't withstand 3 moves from the evil, sacrificial spirit. It seemed that the evil, sacrificial spirit's power wasn't limited to the Yang God, Ascension God realm. He seemed to know what I was thinking, but he didn't answer me. He shook his head and walked to a corner. He waved his hand and used his shaman energy to cover the entire hall. The yellow smoke barrier had been broken, so he used his shaman energy to cover the hall. It was a good thing. In the next few hours, there were still countless mountain spirits and ghosts rushing over. But fortunately, none of them were as powerful as the previous figure. That was why the evil, sacrificial spirit didn't take action. Tong Tong, and I could deal with him easily. At dusk, the aura in the hall disappeared. It seemed that Jinren Guan had finished casting his spell. It had been 3 days, but I didn't know if he had succeeded or not. I asked the evil sacrificial spirit to remove the barrier. When I was about to enter the hall, Jinren Guan opened the door and slowly walked out. However, I still didn't see the fat man. At this moment, Jinren Guan's face was pale. It seemed he had consumed a lot of energy during the past 3 days. However, I didn't have time to worry about him. I walked forward and asked about the fat man's situation. He paused for a moment and told me. The treatment went smoothly. The fat man is fine now. However, he has consumed a lot of energy during the past 3 days, so he's still unconscious. After hearing his words, I felt relieved. Since the fat man was asleep, I didn't want to disturb him. Then, I helped Jinren Guan back to his room. Since the fat man's problem was solved, I didn't have anything urgent to do. I planned to wait for the fat man to wake up before bidding farewell to Jinren Guan and returning to Shenzhen. Although I wasn't born and raised in Shenzhen, my feng shui shop had become the only place I could settle down after my parents had passed away. Moreover, some of my friends were also in Shenzhen, so I could take care of them when I returned. Moreover, I hadn't studied the 2nd volume of the Death Scripture since I had opened it. I could use this time to rest and reorganize. For a long time, I had been tied down by many things, so I didn't have time to improve my strength. Although my current battle prowess wasn't inferior to that of an ordinary young god celestial master, it was still far from enough to rescue by and from the hands of the heavenly Tao. This time, it was time to calm down and cultivate the 2nd volume of the Death Scripture. When the fat man woke up, it was already noon the next day. I carefully asked about his situation and briefly told him about the matter of retrieving the monster core. Then, I mentioned that I was preparing to return to Shenzhen. When the fat man heard this, he immediately got up from the bed and said that he wanted to go back with me. I naturally welcomed him, but I had heard from Jinren Guan that although the fat man's body had recovered, it would still take some time for him to return to his previous state. Even though I only wanted to calm down and recuperate for a period of time, I've always been a jinx. Who knows if something dangerous will happen again? Since the spiritual energy on Mount Huangguan was abundant, it was most suitable for the fat man to stay here and continue his recovery. Thus, I advised him that it wouldn't be too late to find me in Shenzhen after his strength had recovered. When the fat man heard my words, although he was reluctant, he nodded and didn't mention this matter again. After bidding farewell to Jinren Guan, I brought the evil sacrificial spirit down the mountain and returned to Shenzhen. Along the way, I had nothing to do, so I closed my eyes and nourished the sword energy in my body while recalling my recent experiences. I went to the Spirit Lock Tower to deliver the prayer beads and opened the 2nd volume of the Death Scripture. When I returned the Eastern Emperor Bell, I learned about the matter between Nangong and the Laozhan headmaster. Then, I returned to the Green Hill country to retrieve the monster core to save the fat man. On the surface, these matters didn't seem to be related, but after thinking about it carefully, there seemed to be some connection. Chapter 789. It was late at night the next day when we returned to the metaphysics shop. The shop was already locked, so the evil sacrificial spirit and I had to fly upstairs. As soon as we stood still, the light in the room lit up. Jean Cameron was sitting on the sofa, looking at us. He was wearing thin clothes, and his eyes were a little swollen. It seemed he had sensed our auras and was waiting for us. I went forward to greet him. Then, I asked about Wang Li's recent situation. The evil sacrificial spirit wasn't in the mood to listen to us and returned to his room. I learned from Zhang Kanwan that after Wang Li had been tortured by the ghostly face, his body was much stronger than an ordinary child's. His talent wasn't bad, either. That was why he had developed faster and could already walk and talk. He planned to stay here and teach Wang Li. He would put aside all the grudges in the metaphysics world. Before Wang Li grew up, he wouldn't leave this place. I was happy for him as I looked at his smiling face when he mentioned Wang Li. The world of Jianghu was dangerous, and there was no day without disputes in the metaphysics world. It wasn't a bad move for him to stay here and teach Wang Li. After talking about Wang Li, he asked me why I had come back this time. Over the years, every time I returned to Shenzhen, I always had a purpose. I couldn't blame him for asking that question. However, the situation was different this time. I shook my head and told him, I just want to rest for a while. I don't have a plan for how long I'll stay. Zhang Kanwan gave me a slight nod and didn't ask further. After talking to Zhang Kanwan, I returned to my room. The furnishings in the room hadn't been touched, but it was very clean. It seemed Xie and Lu often came here to clean it. I sat on the bed and took out the second volume of the Death Scripture from my Shangliu bag. I opened it in my hand and read it carefully. I remembered that the first volume recorded some geography, geomancy, and the introduction of ghosts and monsters. There weren't many cultivation techniques. Moreover, the cultivation techniques were only mentioned before the Heavenly Seal Master. However, the second volume was mostly about cultivation techniques, including battle techniques and some heart sutras. I skimmed through it, and my eyes eventually locked on a cultivation technique called the Sky-Devouring Secret Art. Just by listening to the name, I felt a majestic aura. After looking at it carefully, it was indeed extraordinary. There was no record of which sect this sky-devouring art belonged to. It only described its use and cultivation method. I pondered for a long time before I finally figured out a way to do it. Ordinary cultivation methods were to circulate the Tao Qi in the body to a certain acupoint according to the meridians, and then use it through the contraction of the acupoint. However, the devouring heaven incantation was different. Instead, it reversed the flow of qi of the way in the meridians, causing the acupoints to contract passively, thereby absorbing energy from the outside world through the skin. It was just that the second volume did not mention what kind of energy it was. However, according to my conjecture, everything in this world is transformed from energy. As long as it could promote cultivation, it could be called energy. In that case, the sky-devouring secret art was indeed a peculiar cultivation technique. Not only that, but it also mentioned that if one mastered this technique, they would have the ability to devour the heavens. This description shocked me a little. If not for the fact that it was recorded in the Death Scripture, it was very likely that people would regard it as an evil technique. Of course, good and evil always existed in one's heart. As long as it was used properly, there would be many benefits and no harm. I continued to read while trying to figure out how to use the sky-devouring secret art. According to the description, when using this technique against an enemy, I could transfer the energy of the enemy's attack into my body, thereby reducing the damage on the surface of my body. However, once the absorbed energy was saturated, it would cause great harm to the body. There didn't seem to be any method to resolve this, so I couldn't understand it. If I could convert all the energy from the outside world for my own use, I could save the time I had to absorb the dragon energy from the jade bracelet. Just relying on the dragon energy to restore my strength wouldn't last long. Moreover, more than half of the dragon energy in the jade bracelet had been used to treat the fatty. I was afraid that it wouldn't be long before it was used up. Thinking about this, I turned around and read again to see if I had missed any cultivation techniques. However, after checking for a while, I didn't find anything. While thinking about this, I suddenly remembered that before we went to Chiyo's tomb, the fatty had performed a divination for me. Because of this, he was punished by the heavens, and Zhang Kanwan was also implicated. However, at that time, Zhang Kanwan had used the secret technique of Wen Shan's lineage to digest the power of the heavens' punishment in his body and advance to the heavenly seal master realm. Later on, he had taught me and the fatty the art of devouring. If I used the sky-devouring secret art and the art of devouring at the same time, I might be able to convert the energy I absorbed into my body. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but feel excited. I hurriedly closed my eyes and tried to cultivate the sky-devouring secret art. However, after a long time, I only felt refreshed, but I didn't feel any energy entering my body. I tried a few times, but the results were the same. I didn't know what was going on. Feeling helpless, I temporarily stopped cultivating and continued to think. The cultivation technique recorded in the second volume of the Death Scripture definitely wouldn't have any problems. After carefully recalling it, I didn't make any mistakes in the cultivation steps. If that was the case, the problem was most likely with the surrounding environment. The metaphysics area was located in Shenzhen, and the surrounding greenery was considered good compared to other areas. However, overall, the vegetation was still sparse, and the spiritual energy was even thinner. There wasn't much energy for cultivation. That was why I only felt refreshed when I used the sky-devouring secret art a few times, but nothing else happened. After understanding the crux of the matter, I didn't harp on it anymore. I planned to find the evil, sacrificial spirit tomorrow to test it out. The next morning, I knocked on the evil, sacrificial spirit's door and told him about the cultivation technique. Of course, he didn't refuse when I asked him to test it out. He nodded and listened to me explain in detail what to do. Then he mobilized the shaman energy in his body and prepared to attack me. I hastily stopped him. The evil sacrificial spirit was too strong. If he attacked me in the metaphysics shop, it would cause a huge commotion. I was afraid that it would cause some trouble. It would be safer to find an empty space. After listening to me, he nodded and thought that it was reasonable. Then he followed me out of the city. Around 2 hours later, I found a deserted mountain that was rarely visited. It was early in the morning, and the surroundings were foggy. Naturally, no one would notice us. Moreover, the vegetation was lush, and the spiritual energy in the air was abundant. It was the perfect place to cultivate. After standing still, I signaled the evil sacrificial spirit to attack. He didn't delay and mobilized the shaman energy in his body to his hands. Wind blew under his feet, and he instantly appeared in front of me. When his palm hit my chest, I immediately used the sky-devouring art. The abundant shaman energy in his hands quickly weakened and disappeared after a few seconds. I had absorbed all of it into my body. Considering my cultivation base, the evil sacrificial spirit didn't use much shaman energy. However, with his cultivation base, even a simple movement of his finger was powerful. If I hadn't used the sky-devouring art, I would have been blown away. Now that I was standing firmly in my original spot, it was obvious that the sky-devouring art wasn't ordinary. The evil sacrificial spirit looked surprised. After he retracted his stance, he frowned and looked at me. It seemed that he wanted to see if I was using the cultivation technique. I didn't care about anything else. While frantically circulating the sky-devouring art, I also used the devouring power that Zhang Kanwen had taught me to wear down the shaman energy. Not long after, the shaman energy flowed through my meridians and into the veins of the sky, turning into a power that I could use. After I succeeded, I was elated. At first, it was just a speculation of mine. Who knew that I would succeed after I tried it? Moreover, the combination of the two cultivation techniques was much more powerful than the original sky-devouring art. It could be considered an upgraded version of the sky-devouring art. Of course, while I was happy, I also had a clear understanding. The reason why I could refine it so quickly was that the evil sacrificial spirit was using shaman energy, and I was also cultivating shaman energy. The two didn't repel each other, and I only needed to use the devouring power to guide it. As early as the ancient times, there were very few people who cultivated sorcery chi, so there were very few variations in it, and it was almost of the same origin. However, Chi of Tao was different. After thousands of years of inheritance, different schools of Chi of Tao had given rise to many branches. For example, Tong Tong's Yin Chi, Fatty Zhanshi Tao. Fundamentally speaking, they were all Chi of Tao, but there was a huge difference between them, and they could not be mentioned in the same breath. Therefore, absorbing the evil sacrificial spirit's power was easy, but absorbing other people's power wouldn't be so easy. I had to work hard to connect with them. On the other hand, the speed of absorption was closely related to the power that I was facing. For example, when Jean Canwin was refining the power of heaven's punishment, the power of heaven's punishment was too strong, and the power wasn't completely compatible with Taoist energy. That was why it took him a long time. After understanding the magical effects of the sky-devouring art and the direction that I needed to work hard on, I felt better. With this technique in hand, I'll be able to protect my life when I face an even stronger opponent in the future. It was around noon when I returned to the metaphysics shop with the evil, sacrificial spirit. Xie and Lu didn't know that I had returned last night. When they saw me enter the shop, they were surprised. Then they became happy. However, there were still customers in the shop, so they came to greet me. I didn't linger on the first floor and went upstairs. Not long after, they finished their business downstairs and hurried to see me. They told me that they had something to report. I thought they were worried about the talismans in the shop again. However, they told me that a person who cultivated witchcraft qi had appeared in Hong Kong. I couldn't help but be startled by this news. For many years, besides me and the evil, sacrificial spirit, Nangong was the only person I knew who cultivated shaman energy. Could they be talking about Nangong? I had always wanted to meet Nangong because of the master of Mount Lao. The evil sacrificial spirit seemed to know what I was thinking. He frowned and said, "Why don't we go there and see?" I had the same thought. If it was Nangong, I could ask him about the master of Mount Lao. If it wasn't Nangong, he must be a member of the shaman tribe or someone with the inheritance of the shaman tribe. It would be good to find out more about him. I didn't linger and took the evil, sacrificial spirit to Hong Kong. It only took 2 hours to drive from Shenzhen City to Hong Kong through the Western Passage. However, the Xie and Lu brothers didn't know where the person cultivating shaman energy was. The evil sacrificial spirit, and I could only wander around Hong Kong to sense the aura of shaman energy. Although Hong Kong wasn't big, it was hard to find a person with just the two of us. We searched for the whole afternoon, but we didn't find anything. It wasn't a good idea to continue like this. The last time I came to Hong Kong, I had a good relationship with the Mi family. They had a high status in Hong Kong and a lot of connections. If I could ask the Mi Ding City for help, it would save me a lot of trouble. After making up my mind, I didn't linger and headed directly to the Mi family's manor. As soon as I arrived at the outskirts of the manor, I sensed several strong waves of Tao energy coming from inside. Not only that, but I also sensed a wisp of shaman energy among those waves of Tao energy. It was true that one could wear out iron shoes in fruitless searching only to find it by chance. I carefully sensed and found that the waves of shaman energy were weak and unfamiliar. It didn't look like it came from Nangong. It was possible that another member of the shaman tribe had shown up. Although it wasn't Nangong, I was still excited. The appearance of a member of the shaman tribe would help me understand many things about the tribe. Moreover, since this person cultivated shaman energy, perhaps he had some connection with Nangong. Chapter 790. Very quickly, we entered the Mi family's manor. When I looked up, there was an intense fight going on in the small square not far away. These people weren't very powerful. From their attire, they seemed to be from the Metaphysics Association. I found it strange. The Metaphysics Association was very powerful in the country, so it was normal to bump into a few glory of consciousness cultivators. However, this was Hong Kong. Since when did the Metaphysics Association's power spread here? There was a young man surrounded by the few people from the Metaphysics Association. The witchcraft aura that I felt just now came from him. I took a quick look and confirmed that his cultivation was at the early stage of glory of consciousness. He was also at glory of consciousness, but he was able to fight against a few people of the same cultivation. This guy didn't embarrass the people that cultivated witchcraft aura. However, looking at his current state, he seemed to be injured and wouldn't be able to hold on for long. Since we both cultivated witchcraft aura, we were of the same lineage. Naturally, I wouldn't leave him in the lurch. Very quickly, I walked to the side of the small square. I clenched my fist, and the true essence in my meridians of the heaven flowed out. Then, I flicked my sleeve, and an enormous air current surged out. It swept the people from the Metaphysics Association away and threw them out of the me family's manor. They were merely glory of consciousness. Under my power that was on par with the sun god, they naturally couldn't fight back. Moreover, with their identities, I didn't need to explain anything. It was more straightforward to chase them away. After chasing the small fries away, I wanted to ask about the background of the young man that cultivated witchcraft aura. Who knew that before I could ask, he suddenly knelt on the ground and asked me in a choked voice, "Master, is that you?" Hearing that voice, I was stunned. Then I reacted. The young man in front of me was Mi Ding City's son, Mi Tai. In an instant, a light flashed in my mind, and I completely understood the cause and effect. Back then, Mi Tai was obsessed with metaphysics, but he didn't have the talent. I saw his sincerity, so I gave him a chance to cultivate witchcraft aura. I wasn't sure what kind of talent was needed to cultivate witchcraft aura, but I knew that since he didn't have the talent in Dao Qi, even if he had the talent in witchcraft aura, it wouldn't be too high. Hence, I didn't pay much attention to him after I taught him the cultivation method. That was why I didn't recognize him when I saw him. Who would have thought that Mi Tai, who had no cultivation talent, would give me such a big surprise? Not only did he reach the next level and become a cultivator, he even had glory of consciousness cultivation in a short year. This was simply unbelievable. While I was shocked, Mi Tai knelt in front of me and kowtowed 3 times and 9 times. His eyes were filled with tears. Seeing him like this, I felt rather gratified in my heart. I hurriedly helped him up and asked how his injuries were. His expression was extremely agitated. He opened his mouth as if he had 1,000 words to say, but they were all stuck in his throat. After a long while, he shook his head and said that his injuries were fine. Although he said that he was fine, his body couldn't stop trembling, and there was dark red blood seeping out of the corner of his mouth. It was obvious that his injuries weren't light. I put my hand on his shoulder and brought him back to the room. I asked the evil, sacrificial spirit to stabilize his wounds. After he recovered, he hurriedly stood next to me respectfully. After expressing his gratitude, he asked me why I came back to Hong Kong. I naturally came here to look for him. I thought that the person with shaman energy was either Nangong or another member of the witch tribe who had inherited shaman energy. Who would have thought that the person I found would be him? I smiled bitterly and shook my head. I didn't answer him. Instead, I asked him, how did his cultivation progress so quickly in the 1 year that we were apart? Hearing my question, Mi Tai didn't dare to hide anything and told me everything. From his words, I found out that ever since I passed the ink bead to him, he understood that this was his only chance. He understood that this was his only chance. So he didn't dare dally and immediately found a remote place to concentrate on comprehending shaman energy. All these years, he had been searching for the path of cultivation, so he came in contact with all kinds of ancient books. However, due to the blockage of his meridians and acupoints, he couldn't comprehend Taoist energy. However, he didn't expect that he would only spend a month to comprehend shaman energy. This made him ecstatic, and he didn't dare to slack off. He knew that if he wanted to advance to the pressure point realm, he had to go through the baptism of dragon energy. However, this was only a way for people who cultivated Taoist energy. I didn't tell him how to cultivate shaman energy. However, he thought that since shaman energy and Taoist energy could be used by ordinary people to cultivate, they might have something in common. However, I told him that he couldn't tell anyone about cultivating shaman energy, and he couldn't use it in front of others. He had no choice but to ask his father, Mi Ding City, to find the dragon vein through the Mi family. His father knew that it wasn't easy to repay a favor from the Xian and Taoist families, but he was happy to see that Mi Tai had a chance to cultivate. A few days later, he found out that there was a dragon vein somewhere in Shenzhen. The aura of the dragon vein wasn't strong, but it was better than nothing. Speaking of this, I suddenly remembered what happened under the orchard in Shenzhen. It seemed that the dragon vein Mitai was talking about was the one under Wen Shan's ancestral land. He didn't know that shaman energy and Taoist energy were completely different. Back then, I relied on the ink bead that Xiao Jing gave me to advance my shaman energy to the pressure point realm. Mitai was also a person who cultivated shaman energy, so the baptism of dragon energy couldn't help him advance to the pressure point realm. However, the dragon vein he found happened to be the one that Prime Minister Wen used to save the Southern Song dynasty. He turned the Tai Sui into a true dragon vein to reverse the fate of the country. After 1,000 years of transformation, the Tai Sui hadn't completely turned into a true dragon vein, so there was both dragon energy and shaman energy inside. The source of shaman energy I knew, other than Wen Shan's ancestral land, was only found in Thailand. I didn't expect Mitai to coincidentally find that place. It seemed that his cultivation of shaman energy was the will of the heavens. After Mitai went to Wen Shan's ancestral land, he also found that strange phenomenon, but he didn't know the reason behind it. However, since he found shaman energy, he gave up on using dragon energy to baptize himself and turned to absorbing shaman energy. After a few months, he reached the pressure point completion. Throughout the entire process, Mitai had not been discovered that he was cultivating wizard chi. Next, he needed to prepare to advance to the glorious knowledge realm. He also knew that in order to advance to the glorious knowledge realm, he had to find a bright stone. However, he couldn't find a bright stone by himself. Therefore, he had to return to Hong Kong to discuss this with his father. When Mi Ding City heard that Mitai had reached the pressure point completion realm, he couldn't help but feel happy. However, it would be difficult to find a bright stone. Luckily, the Mi family had a lot of connections, and they had a good relationship with the Xian and Daoist families. Soon, they found a few bright stones. Luckily, these bright stones had all the attributes, so they didn't delay Mitai's plan. However, when Mitai reached the glory of knowledge realm, there was also a strange phenomenon in the sky. Now, the fact that he cultivated shaman energy was exposed, so the Metaphysics Association sent people to hunt him down. He wanted to find me for protection, but I didn't tell him where I lived before I left. Therefore, he went back to the Mi family's manor. However, the people from the Metaphysics Association didn't give up and followed him all the way here. That was why the previous scene happened. After Mitai finished talking, he didn't say anything else. From his words, I finally understood the whole story. I was surprised that Mitai's innate talent in cultivating shaman energy was so strong. In just 1 year, he had reached the middle stage of the glory of knowledge realm. Even I couldn't compare to him. I thought that Mitai had encountered some miraculous encounter during the past year. After receiving his negative answer, I became more suspicious, but I couldn't figure out why. I turned to look at the evil, sacrificial spirit and asked, "What did you find?" After listening to me, he didn't hurry to answer. Instead, his eyes fell on Mitai. His face didn't change, and I couldn't tell what he was thinking. After a long time, he stood up and walked to Mitai. He placed his hands on the top of Mitai's head. Mitai knew that the evil, sacrificial spirit was my friend, so he didn't resist. However, his eyes were suspicious. I didn't mind him and focused on the evil, sacrificial spirit. After a while, the evil, sacrificial spirit retracted his hands. There was a relaxed look on his face. It seemed like he already knew the reason. I was curious, so I asked, "What's the reason?" The evil, sacrificial spirit sat down and whispered to me. When I knew that Mitai's meridians and acupuncture points had become one, I thought that he couldn't cultivate. However, I gave him an ink bead because he had a heart that pursued Tao. The problem was with the ink bead. Due to my bloodline, the shaman energy in the ink bead was different from that of an ordinary shaman. As for what the difference was, the evil sacrificial spirit didn't know. He only said that although the shaman energy in the bead was weak, it was enough to change Mitai's constitution. After a month, Mitai's meridians and acupuncture points had been slowly opened. His constitution was different from ordinary people. So after overcoming his congenital defects, his talent for cultivation was much stronger than ordinary people. Little Wang Li was a good proof of that. Moreover, the ink bead was formed by the shaman energy in my body. It contained a trace of the power of my bloodline. That was why Mitai had become who he was today. The evil sacrificial spirit's words made me feel enlightened. I didn't expect that I would inadvertently create a cultivation genius. Seeing that Mitai had grown to this point, I felt comforted. Although all of this is because of my ink bead, if you think about it carefully, this is his good fortune. To me, it's as easy as lifting a finger. While we were talking, Mi Ding Chung heard that I had returned to Hong Kong and hurried back. Then, he heard from Mitai what had happened today. He was very grateful to me. He hurried to ask the servants to prepare dinner. While we were chatting, I noticed that Mi Ding Cheng's face looked strange, but I didn't know why. I guessed that it was because of Mitai. Since it was related to Mitai, I had to ask him about it. After all, Mitai was my disciple, so I had to pay attention to him. Hearing my question, Mi Dingcheng sighed and told me what was bothering him. Since the Metaphysics Association knew about Mitai, they wouldn't let him go easily. Mi Dingcheng knew that I was powerful, so he wanted to ask me to let Mitai follow me. On one hand, he could learn from me, and on the other hand, he could get my protection. What he said made sense. After today, Mitai wouldn't be able to stay in Hong Kong anymore. Although the path of cultivation was full of hardships and dangers, it was the same for me in the past. However, Mitai's current power was too weak. He couldn't resist the Metaphysics Association's pursuit. It was safe for him to follow me. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.